Hey, hi there. Before we settle in, tell me, what time is it where you're watching? Which country are you listening from? I always love seeing your comments. Seriously, it makes me smile every time you drop a little hello, or share where you're tuning in from. And if you feel relaxed, you can follow like whatever feels comfortable. No pressure. Just you, me, and a slow drift back through time. Tonight, we're going somewhere cold. Somewhere where the wind tastes like salt and smoke, and where the people who lived there, well, they were nothing like the wild legends that movies made you believe. We're talking about how Vikings actually lived. Not the fantasy versions with shiny helmets, not the stereotypes. Real people, real routines, real struggles. And before we step into their world, there's something I want you to imagine. Something small, easy to miss. But once you notice it, you won't be able to forget it. It's waiting behind the door of a longhouse. It has to do with what the Vikings valued more than gold, more than conquest, more than the sea itself. But we'll return to that in a moment. Let's start slow. Imagine dawn creeping over the horizon of Scandinavia. Modern-day Norway, Sweden, Denmark. No dramatic thunder. Just a grey light, soft and chilly, sliding across wooden planks and the damp earth outside a longhouse. The Vikings weren't waking up to epic battles or constant raiding. Most days were, honestly, downright ordinary. Quiet. Human. The kind of boring that actually shapes real life. Inside the longhouse, the air is warm and heavy, thick with the scent of wood smoke from the hearth that never truly goes out. Families slept around that fire, not only for warmth but to keep moisture from settling into their bones. You can imagine the gentle crackle, the slow breathing of people curled under wool blankets, the hint of dried fish hanging above them on rafters. And then, someone stirs. Maybe it's a mother reaching for a wooden cup of leftover milk from the night before. Maybe it's a child wriggling out of a blanket. Or maybe, just maybe, it's the person responsible for tending to that constant flame, making sure it never dies. Because in the Viking world, fire wasn't just fire. It was life. And whoever kept it had a responsibility heavier than it looked. You can almost hear their footsteps on the floor. Simple planks, no fancy decorations, just sturdy wood. There's something calming in the simplicity of it. Everything had a purpose. Nothing was wasted. A pot, a tool, a scrap of cloth. Each one earned its place. Outside, the village is waking up too. You'd hear the bleat of a goat, the shuffle of chickens, the distant crash of waves if they lived near the sea. That's the thing. Most Vikings weren't warriors. They were farmers. They lived by the rhythm of seasons, not swords. Their farms were small, often challenging, stubbornly carved into the landscape. Soil wasn't always friendly, weather even less so. But they worked with what they had. Barley, rye, oats. Hardy crops for a hardy people. They raised cattle, pigs, horses. They milked cows and goats. Most mornings weren't filled with adventure. They were filled with chores. Real, exhausting, repetitive chores. But that's where the truth is. A Viking woman grinding grain on a hand-querned stone. Slow, circular, steady. The sound is soft, almost meditative, like the heartbeat of a household. Meanwhile, men might be repairing tools, checking fishing nets, preparing wood for winter. Even children had tasks. Feeding animals, gathering firewood, learning the skills they'd need to survive adulthood. And all of this quiet, unexciting routine, is what kept their world moving. People forget that. They picture roaring warriors, not quiet farmers. But those warriors, they came from homes like this, from daily life like this. The raids were part-time work. The longhouse was the full-time reality. But every now and then, something would shift. A whisper. A traveler returning with news. A ship in the distance. A symbol carved into wood. And that little thing, that thing I mentioned earlier, hidden behind the longhouse door, it would start to matter in a way you're not expecting. It has to do with what Vikings trusted the most. What guided their lives. What shaped their choices, even the smallest ones. But before we open that door fully, we should walk a bit deeper into their morning. Because once you see what's inside, the way you picture Vikings will change forever. And as you picture the longhouse, the cool air slipping around its edges, the steady hum of early work beginning, you might feel a tiny pull, like someone brushing past you in the doorway. Just enough to make you wonder. Alright, settle back in. Let the air feel a little heavier, a little slower. We're stepping quietly into another early Viking morning, still carrying that faint warmth from the longhouse hearth. You can almost hear the soft shuffle of feet on packed earth, the dull thud of a wooden door opening, letting in a thin slice of pale northern light. And outside, the day is waiting, cool and breathing lightly. Most Viking settlements weren't huge, bustling cities. They were clusters of longhouses, maybe a few dozen, sometimes fewer, surrounded by fields, fences, livestock pens, and the raw landscape of Scandinavia. Rocky coastlines, thick forests, hard soil. The kind of place where survival meant learning how to talk to the land, not fight it. So in the second stretch of our story, let's walk out with them. A Viking man steps outside, pulling a simple wool tunic over his shoulders. Nothing grand. Nothing embroidered unless he's wealthier than most. The fabric is scratchy, practical, woven at home. His shoes, leather, shaped by hand, tied with strips of hide. And his breath clouds as it leaves him. Not a dramatic warrior scene, just someone about to start another day of work. What kind of work, though? Well, it depended on the season. In warmer months, the fields demanded constant attention. Barley and rye didn't plant or harvest themselves. Tools needed sharpening. Fences needed fixing. Animals needed feeding. And because daylight hours stretched long in Scandinavian summers, work stretched too. Long, patient, steady. The kind that doesn't show up in sagas but shaped Viking life more than any battle ever did. You might see a group of women walking toward the stream with bundles of fabric or baskets, preparing to wash clothes or rinse wool. They work side by side, talking quietly, hands busy. Viking society wasn't silent, but voices stayed low, practical, rhythmic, blending with the sound of water flowing over smooth stones. Inside the longhouse, someone else might be tending the morning meal. Foods weren't extravagant. A bowl of porridge. Grain cooked slowly over the fire. Maybe leftover fish from the previous night. Bread baked on flat stones. Cheese aged in simple wooden containers. Their meals were heavy on grains, dairy, and preserved fish, not the endless roasted meat of fantasy stories. And yet, there was comfort in it. Warmth. Stability. You can picture the family sitting around the hearth, eating without hurry, listening to the wind tapping at the roof. Maybe someone cracks a small joke. Maybe a child spills something. Ordinary things. Human things. The kind of moments that rarely survive in written history because they didn't feel important. Yet they're the ones that made up almost every day of a Viking's life. But beneath that quiet, there was always a deeper thread, winding through everything they did. The belief that unseen forces shaped their world. Not in a dramatic, magical way, but woven into daily routine. They left small offerings. Bits of food, carved symbols. Simple gestures meant to keep harmony with the spirits of the land and with the gods they trusted. Odin wasn't just a god of war. He was a god of wisdom, poetry, knowledge. Thor wasn't just a hammer wielder. He protected farmers, travelers, households. Freyr was tied to fertility, harvests, peace. These weren't distant myths to the Vikings. They were woven into tasks, into weather, into luck, into life. And this brings us closer, just a little, to the thing behind that longhouse door. The one I hinted at before. Something every family guarded carefully. Something that held their beliefs, their identity, their sense of what made life meaningful. But before we step into that space, we follow the rhythm of the day. You walk through the village now. A woman draws water from a well, muscles straining as she pulls the bucket upward. A teenage boy tends sheep near the edge of a small field, whistling softly to keep them moving. A small child tries to help carry firewood but drops half of it, only to laugh about it when someone gently helps her pick it back up. And then there are the craftsmen, the people whose work shaped the Viking world in quiet ways. A blacksmith hammering iron, sparks popping like tiny stars around him. a woodworker carving the frame of a sled, a boat builder checking the curve of planks for a small fishing boat. Not a longship, not a war vessel, just something to feed a family. The sound of carved tools scraping along wood, metal striking metal, fire roaring softly inside a forge. It blends into something soothing, something almost hypnotic. Even the smell of tar they used for waterproofing boats feels like part of the morning air. Sharp, earthy, clinging to clothes and fingertips. Everything in their environment came from effort. Nothing was quick. Nothing was mindless. Life demanded patience, attention. And yet, beneath that patience, an unspoken tension always lived. The sea could change everything. One storm could wipe out months of work. One failed harvest could threaten an entire village. One unexpected visitor could bring opportunity. Or danger. That's why their senses were always just a little alert, even in calm moments. You can see it now. How a man pauses as he hears something distant across the water. How a woman looks toward the tree line as though expecting someone to emerge. How children freeze for half a second when a raven lands nearby and tilts its head. Because to them, ravens weren't just birds. Storms weren't just weather. Strange sounds weren't just curiosity. Every sign meant something. Every shift in nature whispered something. And the thing behind that longhouse door, the thing tied to these beliefs, was waiting to be understood. But we're not opening it, not yet. There's still more morning to unfold. More footsteps. More breath steaming in the cold air. More of their world settling into focus before we look at the object that bound their lives to their gods. And to their fate. All right. Come a little closer to the firelight in your imagination. Let your shoulders drop. Let your breathing settle into something unhurried. We're still walking through that Viking morning, stepping deeper into their world. A world built on quiet endurance, steady hands, and the sharp awareness that nature, far more than war, shaped their days. Picture yourself standing just outside the longhouse now. The air is crisp, carrying traces of pine, seawater, and the faint sweetness of hay drying in small stacks. A thin mist curls low over the fields, drifting around the edges of wooden fences. You can almost feel the dampness brushing your skin. It's early enough that the world hasn't fully woken, but busy enough that you're aware of life moving all around you. A few men head toward the shoreline. These aren't the warriors you imagine from movies. They're fishermen. Most Vikings lived closer to fish than to feasts, and the sea was their pantry, their challenge, their unpredictable companion. You can hear the crunch of gravel under their boots as they walk, carrying nets coiled neatly over their shoulders, the rope worn smooth by years of salt and sweat. They push a small boat, nothing like the iconic longships, down the slope toward the water. The hull creaks softly, the tide hisses, and as they step in, balancing with practiced ease, the boat drifts out with a soft whisper, leaving ripples behind like thin silver threads. This quiet moment, this slipping of a boat into morning water, was the heartbeat of many Viking communities. Back near the longhouse, the women start their own work. And work, in a Viking household, never paused. Spinning wool into yarn, weaving it on large upright looms, mending clothes, preparing food, tending animals, organizing the household, managing social gatherings. All these responsibilities belonged to them. And far from being undervalued, Viking women held significant authority within their homes. They controlled key decisions, managed resources, and in many cases carried the symbolic keys to the household, literal iron keys hanging from their belts. Keys not as decoration, but as proof of their position. Imagine one of them now, standing in the gentle light filtering through the longhouse door. Her hair is pulled back loosely, her clothes layered for warmth, and her hands are pale from the morning cold. She lifts a lid from a clay pot to check how much food is left from the previous night. The smell of smoked fish and herbs stirs softly into the air. Nearby, a child, maybe 5 or 6, sits on the floor playing with a small carved wooden figure. Children didn't have many toys, but the ones they had were shaped with care. Little animals, tiny boats, even miniature replicas of gods. And while the adults worked, children absorbed everything. How to weave, how to carve, how to care for animals, how to listen to the elders' stories without interrupting. Because storytelling wasn't entertainment for the Vikings. It was memory. It was law. It was teaching. And every household had at least one person, young or old, who could recite family histories, sagas, poems. Not dramatically, just softly, like passing down a warm flame from one generation to the next. You can almost hear it now. Someone sitting near the hearth, murmuring the tale of a distant ancestor who braved a storm or settled a dispute or carved a farm out of stubborn land. The rhythm of their voice blends with the sound of tools tapping gently in the background. Outside, a pair of young adults prepare for a different kind of work, tending the livestock. Sheep and goats were essential, not just for milk or meat, but for wool. Their wool became clothing, blankets, sails. Yes, even the sails of ships. Without wool, without weaving, the Viking Age could not have existed. Their iconic voyages depended not on iron, not on axes, but on thread pulled from a spinning spindle, twisted slowly by hand. That's the beauty of their world. The grandest things began with the smallest tasks. You walk with them to the pens. You can smell the animals before you see them. The wooden gate is rough under the hand. A goat nudges a girl's sleeve, expecting food. A sheep shakes its woolly body, sending small puffs of dust into the air. And the process begins. Checking hooves, looking for injuries, milking, guiding animals toward grazing areas. None of this is glamorous. None of it feels like the dramatic Viking depictions we're used to. But this is the reality. This is what sustained their villages far more than swords ever did. Meanwhile, from a distance, you hear the rhythmic thud of someone chopping wood. Always wood. Always more wood. It heated their homes. It cooked their food. It built their walls, their roofs, their tools, their ships. It was the backbone of survival. And gathering it took time, strength, and endurance. You follow the sound until you reach a man with a sturdy axe, splitting logs into smaller pieces. Chips of wood scatter around him. His movements are slow but efficient, practiced over years. And as he works, his mind likely drifts, not to battles, not to glory, but to the upcoming winter. Will it be harsh? Will the food stores last? Will the livestock survive? These were the real fears of the Viking world. And now we come to something deeper. Something that begins quietly, almost unnoticed, in the middle of the morning. Someone, maybe an elder, steps out from the longhouse holding a small carved object wrapped carefully in cloth. They walk with intention. Low, respectful. No one speaks. A few villagers glance their way, acknowledging the significance of what's happening, but they don't interrupt. Because that object, that quiet, unassuming thing, is at the heart of everything I've been hinting at. It's the key to their beliefs, their identity, their sense of fate. A small wooden idol, maybe. A carved symbol representing a household spirit. Possibly. A family heirloom tied to ancestors and rituals. Almost certainly. Every Viking home had something like this. Something sacred. Something that didn't belong in the open. Something that connected the living to the unseen forces they believed shaped their lives. The elder disappears behind the longhouse, and the door closes softly. And even though it's just wood settling into its frame, the sound feels heavier, like it's sealing something important inside. That door, that object, that presence, matters more than you think. And very soon we're going to open that door fully. But first, we need to finish walking through the rest of their day so that when we finally look at what they guarded so closely, you feel the weight of it the way they did. Alright, take another slow breath. Let the world around you fall a little quieter, as if you're stepping deeper into that Viking village, the morning stretching into its full light. The mist has lifted now, revealing more of the landscape. Rugged hills, patches of thick forest, a coastline carved by wind and waves. It's a place that feels both harsh and peaceful at the same time, a place where every sound carries a little farther. The bleating of animals, the dull thud of tools, the soft murmur of voices. We're still standing near that longhouse door, the one that closed with such deliberate care. But we're not opening it yet. Not until we understand the rhythm of their world a little more. The long, steady beat of daily life that shaped everything around them. Let's walk a bit farther through the settlement. To your left, you'll notice a group of older men working together near a large wooden frame. They aren't building a ship, not today. They're repairing one. Not a famed longship, but a small coastal vessel used for fishing or for traveling between nearby settlements. Viking tools weren't flashy, but they were sturdy and clever. Iron nails shaped in the forge, tar boiled to seal wood, axes and adzes designed with simple efficiency. You can hear their low conversation, almost humming. Vikings talked while they worked, but rarely loudly. The cold carries sound too well, and quiet was a habit born from living close to nature. Their voices blend with the rhythmic scrape of blades shaving wood, the groan of planks adjusting, the sound of a hammer tapping a nail into place. A little farther along, you pass a row of drying racks where fish hang in neat lines. Preserving food wasn't just a chore, it was survival. Dried fish, salted meat, fermented vegetables. These weren't exotic delicacies. They were everyday foods, dependable and plain. And the smell, sharp, smoky, slightly tangy, hung in the air of every coastal settlement. Now look behind one of the longhouses. You'll see a woman kneeling near a small herb garden. It might surprise you, but many Viking households grew herbs not only for cooking but for medicine. Yarrow, angelica, thyme, juniper. Plants that soothed wounds, eased illness, flavored stews. And knowledge about them passed from mother to daughter, healer to apprentice, in soft words by firelight. Next to her, a wooden bucket sits filled with water drawn from the well. Wells were central to every settlement, and water gathering was a daily ritual. The bucket itself is simple, wooden staves strapped with iron hoops, but sturdy, built to last through years of use. And over by the animal pens, another set of chores continues. A young man is brushing a horse, one of the most prized animals a Viking could own. Horses weren't just for riding. They were symbols of status, helpers in farming, and essential for travel over land. The brush strokes are long, slow, rhythmic, almost meditative. And the horse leans into each one, breath warm in the cool air. The day moves gradually, never rushed. Viking life had urgency, yes, but it was the urgency of seasons, not minutes. They worked with the sun, the soil, the tides, things that couldn't be hurried. And somehow, that gave their days a deep, grounded calm beneath the constant effort. Now listen. Do you hear that faint tapping? Follow it. A group of women sit together outside, working at a loom. Viking looms were tall, angled, and beautiful in their own way. Practical but elegant in function. The women feed wool through their fingers, twisting it into thread, guiding it into cloth. The colors are earthy. Browns, grays, soft reds dyed from madder root, blues from woad. Creating fabric took time, weeks, sometimes months. But clothing was precious, and every thread mattered. The tapping you hear is the rhythm of the loom-weight stones knocking lightly as the women move. It's a soft, hypnotic sound, steady, patient, and if you close your eyes, you can almost feel the texture of the wool between your fingers. Not far away, a small group of children practices with wooden sticks, pretending to be warriors, though their movements are clumsy and more playful than serious. Adults glance over every now and then, amused but not concerned. Real combat training wouldn't begin until much later. Childhood, while full of work, still allowed space for imagination. A dog trots around them, thin, alert, tail flicking back and forth. Viking dogs were loyal companions, hunters, guards, helpers. They lived alongside families, sharing warmth and scraps and the steady rhythm of everyday life. And the sun rises a little higher. In the distance, smoke rises from a small forge. The blacksmith wipes sweat from his forehead as he leans over the glowing embers. He shapes metal with quiet determination, nothing ornate. Hooks, nails, hinges, axe heads, knife blades. A blacksmith's work kept the community functioning far more than any warrior ever did. But while all of this unfolds, the longhouse with a closed door remains quiet. Every now and then, someone glances toward it. Not fearfully, not with worry, just respectfully. Because whatever was carried inside earlier, wrapped in cloth, wasn't a decoration or a relic. It was a symbol of their connection to something deeper, something older, something woven into their understanding of fate and fortune. Inside that door, rituals might be performed. Blessings, simple offerings, nothing dramatic. Just a piece of bread, a carved token, a cup of milk left for a household spirit. These were rituals that kept their world balanced in their eyes. Small acts meant to maintain peace between the seen and the unseen. But the door stays shut. And the elder who went inside hasn't emerged yet. Because inside the longhouse, something sacred is unfolding. Something that shaped their beliefs, guided decisions, and gave meaning to the silent moments between chores and seasons. We'll get there, but slowly, because in the Viking world, nothing sacred was rushed. Now, as the morning shifts toward midday, the village prepares for a meal. People begin to gather. Conversations grow a little louder. Tools are set aside. Smoke thickens as food warms over the fire. And still, the door remains closed. Alright, settle in again. Let the sounds of that Viking village grow a little clearer in your mind. The murmur of voices rising toward midday, the crackle of fire from the central hearths, the faint clang of a tool being set aside after a long morning's work. The light has shifted now, softer but fuller, stretching across the settlement and touching the tops of wooden roofs with a pale northern glow. We're easing into the middle of the day, the moment when everyone pauses. Not fully resting but slowing down just enough to breathe. Picture the inside of a longhouse now. The big one, the one with a closed door in the back room. The main hall feels alive with warmth. The hearth burns steadily, its smoke curling upward into the dim rafters before slipping out through the smoke hole. Shadows flicker across the beams, making the carved symbols etched into them seem like they shift softly with the firelight. Families gather around simple wooden tables or sit close to the fire itself. Bowls of warm food are passed around. Thick barley porridge infused with herbs, maybe bits of dried fish added in for flavor, and bread made from coarse ground flour. Viking meals weren't elaborate, but they were hearty, filling, made to sustain long hours. Listen to the sound of wooden spoons scraping gently against bowls. Someone laughs quietly. Someone else tells a small story. Nothing grand, just something about a stubborn goat or a recent dream. A child tries to sneak an extra piece of bread. An elder chuckles and pretends not to notice. Life wasn't always harsh. It had softness too. Small comforts, warm meals, the familiar weight of being part of a family that depended on one another. And yet, even here, in the middle of this warm midday scene, there is a subtle awareness that something important is happening behind that closed door. The elder who carried the wrapped object into the back room still hasn't returned. And though no one interrupts, no one asks, everyone feels it. The quiet thread that ties their everyday life to their beliefs pulls just a little tighter. You can imagine the doorway now. Wooden frame darkened by years of smoke, a simple curtain of woven wool hanging over it. Behind it is the stockhole, the household's small sacred space. Not a temple, not a shrine filled with gold. Just a corner reserved for the spirit of the home, for ancestors, for the little carved tokens that connected a family to their past. The Vikings believed every home had a Veatir, a kind of spirit or presence that watched over the land or the household. Not a ghost, not a god, something quieter, older. They left offerings for this presence to keep the house protected, the animals healthy, the fields fertile. Even those who sailed on long voyages carried small wooden idols with them as reminders of their families and the spirits they trusted. Inside that room, the elder may be whispering a simple prayer. Nothing dramatic, just words spoken slowly to show respect. Maybe asking for luck for the fishing boats. Maybe thanking the ancestors for the season's early harvest. Maybe asking for protection for someone traveling soon. Their rituals weren't about spectacle. They were about connection. Now step back outside into the sunlight. People move slowly after their meal. Some return to their tasks. Others take a brief moment to rest. A few men sharpen tools near a small bench, blade edges gliding against whetstones with controlled precision. Sparks flicker in the sunlight. The metallic scrape becomes a quiet, steady rhythm. Nearby, a group of younger adults prepare for an afternoon chore, gathering peat or firewood. Without enough fuel for the long winters, a household could suffer deeply. So this work, though tiring, was essential. They tie ropes around bundles of wood, stack them carefully on sleds or simple drags, and prepare to head out toward the forest. Before they leave, one of them glances toward the longhouse with that closed room. Not with worry, but with a respectful nod. Whatever ritual is happening inside isn't meant for everyone to see, but it touches the life of the whole village. Walk a little farther with me. Beyond the cluster of houses, you'll find fields stretching across uneven ground. Barley ripples in the breeze. Rye leans softly under the sun. Farming tools rest along a fence. Wooden rakes, iron-tipped digging sticks, bundles of twine. Everything is handmade, maintained season after season. And in these fields, a few people continue their work, pulling weeds, checking soil, shooing away hungry birds. Farming might seem simple, but in the Viking world it required constant attention. A single storm, a cold snap, or a swarm of pests could threaten months of effort. Feel the rhythm of it. Hands brushing through grain, boots pressing into the earth, the wind sighing gently across the landscape. If you look to the tree line, you'll notice movement. 2 hunters returning with small game hanging from wooden frames. Rabbits, maybe a small deer if they were lucky. Hunting was supplemental, not the main source of food, but it provided variety and helped during leaner times. The hunters walk with quiet pride, not boasting, just carrying the weight of survival in their hands. Back in the village, the blacksmith steps out from his forge for a breath of fresh air. His arms are darkened with soot, but his eyes are calm. In his hands he holds something newly shaped, a small knife, practical and clean. Tools like this weren't luxuries. They were lifelines. For cutting rope, preparing food, carving wood. Almost every adult carried one. He cools the blade in a bucket of water, steam rising in a soft hiss. Another ordinary moment, another piece of daily life. And still, that longhouse door remains closed. And every so often, you'll notice someone looking toward it, pausing for half a heartbeat, as though remembering something sacred sits inside, guiding their day in ways too subtle to speak aloud. The afternoon sun settles lower. Shadows lengthen. The village takes another slow breath as work continues. And soon we'll step toward evening, when Viking life shifts again, when stories grow longer, when fires burn brighter, and when the world feels just a little more mysterious. Hey, soften your breathing again. Let the air in your imagination cool just a little as we move from the brightness of midday toward the quieter, slower rhythm of the Viking afternoon. The sun sits lower now, casting longer shadows that stretch across the settlement like calm fingers of fading light. Everything feels a bit softer, a little more tired, but in a peaceful way, the way a community settles into the second half of its day. We're going to walk slowly through this moment, step by step, feeling the shift from work to reflection, from noise to gentler sound. Picture the longhouse roofs first. Thick layers of turf cover them, growing moss and tiny flowers in the warmer months. Those roofs weren't just decoration. They were insulation, protection from the brutal cold that came with winter. And as the sun tilts, you can see faint steam rising where the warm air meets the cool outside. It's a small detail, but it tells you everything about how carefully built these homes were. Now look toward the shoreline. The fishermen begin returning, their small boats cutting shallow trails across the water. The oars dip slowly, rhythmically, the sound barely rising above a whisper. Their faces are sun-touched, tired, but not exhausted, not yet. They carry nets filled with their catch. Cod, herring, maybe some flatfish. Enough to feed multiple families for a day. Maybe more if they smoke or dry part of the haul. When they pull their boats ashore, others come to help. Vikings shared labor in ways that feel almost communal. No one worked alone unless necessary. They carry baskets, coil nets, Scrape away bits of seaweed clinging stubbornly to the hull. A seagull lands nearby, bold and shameless. It waits for scraps. It always does. Just a little farther inland, the women who spent the morning weaving have shifted to afternoon tasks. Some begin washing clothes in wooden tubs filled with water warmed from the fire. Clothes are scrubbed using ash soap, made from animal fat and lye. You can imagine the smell. Earthy, smoky, a bit sharp, but somehow familiar. One woman scrubs rhythmically, her sleeves rolled up to her elbows. Two others chat quietly beside her, their voices weaving in and out of the soft splash of water. They don't gossip loudly. Their words are slow, thoughtful. Vikings valued quiet strength, not noisy bravado. Even in conversation, there's a steadiness you can feel. Nearby, the younger children chase each other between the houses, laughing as they run across uneven ground. Their boots thud softly against the dirt, and every so often you hear a sharp squeal when someone slips or someone else wins a playful tackle. Childhood wasn't carefree. They had chores, lessons, responsibilities, but moments like this still existed in gentle bursts. Walk deeper into the village. A group of elders sits on low stools outside a longhouse, enjoying the late sun. Their hair is gray or white, their faces lined with years of weathered experience, but their eyes remain sharp. One of them whittles a small piece of wood, shaping it slowly into something useful. Maybe a peg for a door, maybe a toy for a child. Another elder tells a story in a voice so soft you almost have to lean in mentally to hear it. It's not a saga, not a long heroic tale, just a memory of a winter long past, or a lesson learned from the sea. Stories like this weren't rare. They were the threads that tied generations together, teaching, reminding, grounding. A pair of dogs wander lazily near them, ears perked occasionally at distant sounds. Dogs never fully slept during the day. They listened, always listening, attuned to every shift in the air, the forest, the behavior of the livestock. Their presence added a layer of quiet security, a living alarm system. And then, there it is again. Your eye returns to that longhouse, the one with the closed door in the back room. The elder who went inside earlier still hasn't emerged. And now, with the day moving toward evening, the moment grows heavier, quieter, more significant. People don't speak of it, but their glances say enough. Rituals take time. They aren't rushed. They unfold like the turning of seasons. Slow, deliberate, meaningful. Inside that room, the air is probably thick with the smell of herbs burned lightly or placed in small bundles. The carved object wrapped in cloth sits before the elder, maybe on a wooden stool, maybe on a small table. It could be an idol of a god, or a spirit figurine, or a carved ancestor token, or even a simple piece of wood used in rituals of blessing and protection. This isn't the loud, dramatic religion you see in films. It's quiet, intimate, a relationship between the household and the forces they believed shaped their world. The elder might be murmuring a simple prayer, asking for good weather, or for the return of a loved one from sea, or for peace within the home. These words wouldn't be shouted. They would barely rise above the sound of breathing. But let's walk away from the door for now. There's more happening around us. The hunters who returned earlier have now begun preparing their catch. They skin the animals carefully, the knives slicing cleanly through fur and flesh. They separate the meat, the hide, the sinew, nothing wasted. Hides will become clothing. Bones will become tools. Meat will be cooked fresh or dried for winter. The smell of fresh meat mixes with a salty breeze from the shore, creating a scent that was completely normal to them, one that marked the cycle of survival. A group of teenagers practices with shields and wooden swords a short distance from the homes. They aren't warriors yet, but training begins slowly, focusing on balance, posture, how to hold a shield properly. There's no shouting, no barking orders. The older mentor guiding them demonstrates with patience, correcting quietly, letting them feel the weight of the movements. This wasn't about teaching aggression. It was about teaching readiness, discipline, responsibility. Now imagine the sun dipping just a little lower. Golden light sweeps across the village, casting long, soft shadows that stretch toward the sea. Smoke rises from cooking fires again as families begin preparing the evening meal. The smell is comforting. Fish roasting, bread reheating, herbs sizzling in animal fat. Boats creak softly as the tide shifts. A raven lands on a wooden post, its feathers glossy in the fading light. To the Vikings, ravens were more than birds. They were symbols, omens, messengers. Not feared, not worshipped, but respected. A woman carrying a basket pauses to watch the raven. Just for a moment. Then she moves on, her footsteps carrying the rhythm of thousands of similar afternoons lived by those before her. And still, that door in the longhouse remains closed. The elder inside is not finished. Whatever is happening in that sacred space, it's reaching its peak, quietly, unseen, yet felt in the subtle shift of the air, the hush that seems to settle over the household. We're inching closer to understanding it. But not yet. The day isn't done. And neither is their story. The light is changing again. Not quite evening. Not quite night. But that in-between hour when the entire Viking settlement seems to exhale. The shadows grow long and the air cools just enough that you can feel the shift. Not on your skin, but somewhere deeper, somewhere in the instinct. This is the hour when animals settle, children slow down, and grown-ups take stock of what the day has given and what the night might ask. Walk with me through this moment. The golden glow of the sinking sun brushes everything with a soft warmth, almost like honey melting across the edges of the longhouses. The walls of these homes, built from timber and insulated with earth, catch the light in ways that make them look alive. If you trace your eyes along the wood grain, you can see decades of storms, seasons, repairs, and family history burned into the surface. A subtle breeze rolls in from the water, carrying a mixture of scents. Wet wood, sea salt, cooked fish, cooling earth, a faint hint of smoke from hearths beginning their evening fires. These smells aren't unpleasant. They are comforting, grounding. They tell you where you are. Life begins to gather itself. A few women kneel near the fire pit, preparing dough for flatbread. They flatten small balls of dough between their palms, sprinkle flour over the surface, then lay each piece onto a heated stone. The bread cooks fast, a soft hiss, a bit of puffing, and then the smell, warm, earthy, reassuring. Nearby, a man sharpens his knife using a whetstone. The scraping rhythm, steady, metallic, adds a quiet music to the evening. Sparks flicker occasionally as the blade catches the last rays of sunlight. Children who were earlier running wild are now slowing down. Some sit in circles playing games with carved bone pieces. Others feed scraps to chickens or call the goats back toward the fence before the full dark settles. And then there's the sound of wool brushing against wood. A woman steps outside with a spindle in her hand. She spins wool absent-mindedly as she watches the path leading back to the settlement. She's waiting for someone. Maybe a husband returning from the forest. Maybe a son who went to gather firewood. Her eyes scan the tree line with quiet expectation, not worry. The Vikings were used to distance, to waiting, to trusting that nature had its cycle. The dogs, earlier lazy, now perk up. Evening triggers something instinctive in them. They trot around the edges of the settlement, ears raised, noses twitching. They aren't aggressive, just alert. This is their time to guard, to listen. Their silhouettes glide between shadows like silent protectors. Look toward the sea. A single longboat, larger than the fishing vessels used earlier, approaches slowly. It's not returning from war or raiding. This one carries traders or travelers. You can tell by the way it moves, unhurried, peaceful, as if its purpose is simply to arrive. The sail is rolled up. The oars are steady. A few figures stand at the bow, scanning the land as if checking for familiar landmarks. This boat wasn't expected, but it doesn't bring fear. Only curiosity. A few villagers pause their tasks to watch, their expressions neutral but keen. Now shift your attention to the center of the settlement. A large wooden post stands there, carved with simple patterns. Lines, swirls, maybe symbols of Thor or Freya or ancestors. It's not a grand shrine, not a temple. More like a gathering marker. As evening deepens, people drift toward it slowly. Not for a ritual, not yet. Just for conversation. Community. Sharing of stories that weren't meant for daylight hours. An old man with a thick beard leans against the post. His eyes half closed as he listens to the younger ones speak. He's lived enough years to learn the power of silence. He lets the others talk, only chiming in when a detail needs correction or when a joke needs a gentle reminder of truth. A soft laugh ripples through the group. Calm, warm, family-like. But let us walk toward the longhouse again. Yes, that one. The one with the back room whose door stayed shut through the afternoon. As we approach, we notice something faint. A thin line of smoke curling out from the vents in the roof. Not from cooking fires, this smoke is different. Smells herbal, sharper, more intentional. The kind of smoke used to sanctify a room, to cleanse an object, or to prepare a space for communicating with something unseen. Listen carefully. They're a very soft rhythmic sound. Not chanting, not voices, but breathing. Slow, deliberate breathing from inside the closed room. The elder inside has entered a deeper part of the ritual. Vikings didn't always pray with words. Sometimes breath itself was part of the invocation, a way to align the body with the unseen forces they respected. Runes might be laid out before them. A carved object might now be unwrapped, exposed to the smoke. Shadows move slowly behind the narrow gap beneath the door. And outside the house, a child passes by, glancing at the door briefly with innocent curiosity. But the child doesn't stop. They've grown up around rituals. They know when to give distance, even without understanding why. A woman places a jug of water near the longhouse door. Not knocking, not calling out, just placing it. A sign of respect, of readiness for whatever the ritual may require when it ends. Then the air shifts. It's very subtle, almost unnoticed. But something inside that room has changed. Not finished, not yet, just changed direction. The energy feels different, quieter but heavier, as if the elder has reached the heart of what they needed to do. But we're not going in. Not now. Not until it's time. For now, we turn away once more and return to the settlement. The sky is deepening, pale gold melting into blue, blue fading toward amethyst. The first star appears overhead, blinking softly, a sign that the last part of the day is coming. And with it, something else. Something that the villagers haven't spoken of, but that they all feel. Shift. A moment approaching. Thread tightening. We're getting closer. Evening settles fully now. A soft, cool blanket stretching across the Viking settlement. Everything slows like the world is lowering its voice. The chickens are already quiet, huddled together in their coop. The goats nudge one another into a corner of their enclosure, their breath warm in the cooling air. The dogs, once pacing, now sit alert at the edges, watchful silhouettes against the dimming sky. Let's walk deeper, slowly, quietly, into this hour. The light from the longhouses glows through thin cracks between timber planks. It's a gentle amber glow, flickering softly with the movement of the hearth flames inside. These lights weren't meant for decoration. They were survival, comfort, and the heart of evening routines. Step closer to one longhouse. Not the ritual one, not yet. Another one, ordinary, lived-in, peaceful. Inside, the whole family is gathered near the hearth. The fire sits low and wide, burning not fiercely but steadily, the flames licking softly at the wood. Shadows dance along the rafters, illuminating bundles of herbs hanging to dry. Sage, wild garlic, juniper, maybe a few medicinal plants like yarrow or angelica. They dry slowly, their scents mixing gently with the smoky air. A large pot sits over the fire, suspended by a wooden frame. Something simple simmers inside. Likely a stew of barley, maybe carrots or leeks, small bits of meat saved from earlier in the week. Vikings didn't waste food. Everything had value, even scraps. The stew thickens the longer it cooks, filling the room with a deep, earthy scent. A woman stirs it occasionally with a long wooden ladle. Her movements are slow, steady, almost rhythmic, as if she's stirring more than food, as if she's stirring the entire mood of the home into calmness. Her face softens in the firelight, and every line tells a story of winters endured, summers worked, and a life built through quiet endurance. A boy sits near her, carving a small wooden figure. His knife glides carefully, shaving thin curls of wood onto the floor. His father watches, not correcting, just overseeing with quiet confidence. Teaching in the Viking world didn't require constant speaking. Children learned through doing, through repetition, through silence that held meaning. On a small bench beside them, an older woman spins wool. The spindle twirls between her fingers, the fibers stretching into thin threads that will later become clothing, blankets, or rope. The sound of the spinning is soft, almost hypnotic, like a whisper in the background of the home's heartbeat. Listen closely. You can hear the faint cracking of tree resin inside the firewood. The occasional pop sends tiny sparks upward. Brief, bright, quickly gone. The smell of burning pine fills the air, warm and familiar. Farther down the longhouse, a child curls under a wool blanket, thumb in mouth, eyes heavy. A dog lies beside the child, its large head resting on its paws. Its fur rises and falls with slow breaths. The bond between Viking families and their animals wasn't sentimentalized the way we imagine today, but it was real. Dogs guarded, herded, hunted, and lived alongside their humans as working companions. Now move back outside. The settlement is quieter now. The longboats pulled ashore earlier are tied firmly, their hulls creaking softly with the tide. The oars rest neatly inside, each one carefully placed. Vikings were deeply organized when it came to their tools. They respected them, tended them, because without tools, survival was impossible. The unexpected trader boat, the one we saw approaching earlier, has now landed. A few men step off, stretching their legs after hours of rowing. Their clothing is dusty from travel, their cloaks smeared with salt from sea spray. They carry nothing threatening, just bundles wrapped in cloth, likely goods to exchange. Amber, furs, iron tools, beads from distant markets, maybe even imported cloth from the Frankish lands. Viking trade networks were vast, stretching far beyond what many imagine. Most Vikings were traders long before they were raiders. Two villagers greet them quietly. Handshakes, nods, small smiles. No celebration, no alarm. Just recognition and the silent ease of people accustomed to comings and goings. A conversation begins. Low voices, nothing hurried. Stories of weather, of places visited, of prices changing in foreign markets. The traders mention perhaps a shift in the southern towns, perhaps new rulers or new tensions. These little fragments of news carry weight. The North depended on information for survival, just as much as tools or food. Now let's return our attention back to that longhouse with the closed room. From here you can see the smoke rising in a thinner line now, less dense, almost transparent in the dark. The herbal scent is fading. This means something. The ritual inside is reaching a quieter phase. The elder has passed through the active part and is entering the listening part. Because Viking spiritual practice wasn't just about asking. It was about listening. Listening to signs, to breath, to instinct, to silence. The villagers know this, and they give respectful distance. Even the dogs have drifted to other parts of the settlement, their instincts guiding them away from the energy of that sacred space. The door remains closed. The shadows inside remain unseen. But the presence behind that door, it's shifting again. Not dangerous, not dark, just focused. You can almost feel the steadiness of the breath inside, slow and controlled, as if the elder is trying to match their pulse with something older than themselves. And outside, the first true darkness settles over the settlement. Lanterns are lit, simple ones made of carved wood, thin horn panels or oiled leather. They glow gently, guiding villagers through footpaths and between houses. The light flickers against the grass, making every step look like part of an ancient dance. A few men finish tying down that trader boat. Rope tightens, not secure. The sound of hemp sliding across wood is rough but satisfying, like closing the last task of the day. The sky now is a deep midnight blue, scattered with early stars. And somewhere beyond the horizon, cold gust rolls through. It doesn't carry danger, but it carries meaning, shift, sign. Something the elder inside that room would understand before anyone else. Soon, we'll see why the ritual began today of all days. Night has finally settled, fully, deeply, without hesitation. It drapes itself over the Viking settlement like a heavy wool cloak. Not threatening, just absolute. The kind of darkness that makes the smallest flame look like a guiding star. The kind that encourages people to gather closer, speak softer, breathe slower. Walk with me, slowly, through this quiet hour. The sky above is almost black, but not empty. The constellations stretch out in crisp clusters, clearer than anything modern eyes usually see. For Vikings, these stars weren't distant mysteries. They were maps, guides, old companions that told them when to plant, when to travel, when storms were coming, when the seasons were shifting. A Viking could read the night sky with the same ease modern people scroll their screens. And tonight, the stars are unusually sharp, almost too sharp, like the air is expecting something. Down below, the longhouses glow like warm pockets of life against the vast darkness. The doorway drapes sway gently in the breeze. You can hear the soft murmur of voices inside, carried just faintly through the wooden walls. Not storytelling time yet, just gentle conversations. Families closing out the day. Move closer to one of the longhouses. Inside, a group sits around the hearth. The fire is lower now, embers glowing with that deep, pulsing red. The heat rises steadily, and the shadows dance around the rafters like living brushstrokes. A man whittles a handle for a new tool. A woman mends a tear in a child's tunic. An older man tells a brief, quiet story. Not a dramatic saga, but a practical memory about past winters, giving advice to the younger ones on how to store root vegetables properly to avoid rot. It's simple, grounded. The real rhythm of Viking evenings. The children listen, not with excitement but with patience, absorbing the everyday wisdom that kept their people alive through harsh seasons. You can almost feel the calm settling into their bones, the warmth sinking into their skin after a long, cold day. Now step back outside. Listen. The settlement is hushed, but not silent. The natural world is alive around it. You hear the distant ocean breathing against the shore. Long, slow waves rolling in, retreating, rolling in again, like a giant creature sleeping. You hear the faint rustle of trees, the leaves whispering to one another in the night breeze. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls once, then again. The animals within the village shift softly. A horse stamps its hoof. A goat murmurs in its sleep. A dog sniffs the air from its resting spot near the path, ears twitching at a sound only it can sense. But nothing feels threatening, just alive. Look now toward the trader boat. The visitors have set up near the shore, unpacking their small belongings with practiced efficiency. One man lights a tiny fire pit and places a kettle over it. The soft metal clink echoes faintly through the quiet air. They speak in low tones, discussing their route, the conditions they faced at sea, the markets they visited. They mention places far from this quiet settlement. Ribe, Hedeby, Burka, centers of trade and exchange, where goods from as far as the Middle East and Central Asia passed through Viking hands. The villagers who remain nearby listen politely. They ask a few questions, but nothing rushed, nothing urgent. Vikings didn't crowd around news. They absorbed it like night absorbs the glow of a candle. Steadily, gradually. Now turn again, to the longhouse with the closed back room. The rest of the settlement has slipped into a near-complete calm, but that longhouse still feels different. Not louder, not brighter, but charged in a way that doesn't fit the peaceful rhythm outside. The smoke rising from the roof vents has thinned almost to nothing. The herbs used earlier have burned down to pale ash. The air around the structure is still, as if holding its breath. Inside that hidden room, the elder sits cross-legged, the carved object placed directly in front of them. The light is dim, just a small ember bowl offering a faint orange glow. Their hands are steady, resting on their knees. Their breathing is even deeper than before. The ritual is shifting again. This is the part where the elder doesn't speak, doesn't chant, doesn't move, not physically. Instead, they listen for patterns, for signs, for the language of symbols, instincts, and subtle energies that mattered enormously in the Viking worldview. Runes may have been cast earlier, small pieces of carved bone or wood, each holding a meaning. Not fortune-telling the way modern minds imagine, but guidance, reflection, a way of interpreting complex decisions through ancient cultural frameworks. Whatever the runes showed, the elder now contemplates quietly. Their eyes are partially closed. Every few breaths, their fingers twitch slightly, tiny movements like someone reaching toward a half-remembered thought. Outside the door, the jug of water left earlier still waits. The villagers do not touch it. They know the ritual is not finished. But you and I can sense it, the energy changing again, growing quieter but heavier, as though the air itself is leaning against the wooden walls to listen. And the villagers, even if they don't consciously know why, begin adjusting their routines. They lower their voices more. They reduce the brightness of their hearths. They walk slower past that house, not in fear, in respect, because without anyone saying it aloud, they feel that the elder is approaching a moment of clarity, a moment of understanding, a moment where whatever was sought will be answered. Not loudly, not dramatically, just answered. Meanwhile, in the sky above, a faint band of light begins forming toward the north, barely visible at first. A pale green shimmer sliding across the blackness, like a brushstroke made by the cold itself. The aurora, subtle now but growing. The Vikings would have recognized this as something meaningful, something beautiful, powerful, and woven into their understanding of the gods and the world. And as the shimmer strengthens, stretching slowly across the sky, inside that hidden room, the elder opens their eyes. Stillness, awareness, as if something they've been waiting for, has just arrived. The night deepens, yet somehow it feels brighter, because the sky has begun to move. That thin green shimmer in the northern sky, barely noticeable at first, slowly unfurls like a ribbon caught in some unseen cosmic current. It stretches, curls, folds, then expands across the darkness with a soft, otherworldly glow. The aurora grows wider, gently pulsing, shifting like breath. To the Vikings, this wasn't just a natural phenomenon. This was a sign, message, presence. And as the aurora strengthens, silently brushing the sky with strokes of green and faint hints of pale yellow, the settlement reacts, quietly, instinctively. No one rushes outdoors in excitement. No one shouts. Instead, doors open softly. Footsteps appear in the pathways. People look upward with calm, steady eyes. Wonder here is slow, reverent, almost sleepy. Step with me between them. A man stands near his doorway, pulling his wool cloak around his shoulders. His eyes reflect the shimmering sky. His expression one of awe but also familiarity, like greeting an old visitor who returns only in certain seasons. Beside him, his wife looks up as well, hands still dusted faintly with flour from the evening bread. She doesn't wipe them off. She simply lets her breath slow and watches the sky ripple. A little girl peeks out from behind her mother's skirt, small fingers gripping fabric. Her eyes widen in fascination, and her mother gently strokes the child's hair, whispering something calm, something reassuring, likely explaining what her own mother once explained to her, that the sky dances to remind them that the world is alive in ways humans can't always understand. More villagers step out, quiet, peaceful, shapes lit by the soft glow from the heavens. No fear, no rush, just acceptance. They've seen the aurora before, but each time feels like the first time. Now look toward the shore. The traders, who earlier were unpacking their bundles, stop what they're doing. One man lifts his head slowly, his face shifting from fatigue to contemplation. He nudges another, who follows his gaze upward. They say nothing for several breaths. These men have traveled far and seen many skies, But the Baltic and Northern Lights always draw the same expression: humbled silence. A few steps away, a dog lifts its head, ears twitching. Animals react differently. Not with wonder, but with attention. Not fear. Just sensing the shift in the air, the strange electricity that humans interpret as beauty. Turn again toward the longhouse with the closed back room. From outside, nothing has changed physically. No one moves toward it. No one whispers near it. But something in the atmosphere around that structure feels tighter, more focused, as if the aurora above is echoing inside the walls. Inside that room, the elder sits perfectly still. Their eyes remain open now. Not wide, not startled, just calmly aware. The dim ember bowl casts a gentle orange glow across their face, highlighting age lines carved by decades of winter wind, salt air, and thoughtful living. The carved object in front of them lies exactly where it was placed, shadows making its symbols pulse faintly in the dim light. Outside the window slit, the aurora's glow spills in like a faint brush of pale green across the floorboards. The elder sees the movement with the edge of their vision, but their focus remains inward. The rhythm of their breath adjusts subtly, slower, deeper, more grounded. The runes they cast earlier rest nearby. Their positions haven't changed. The meanings are already understood. This moment, this silent alignment between sky and ritual, is the final piece. The elder doesn't speak. Words would only dilute what this moment offers. Few breaths pass, then another, then another. The air inside the room feels thicker, not with smoke, not with heat, but with intention. Like something ancient is settling, choosing its place, making itself known in the quiet between breaths. Outside, a few villagers glance toward that longhouse again. Not in curiosity, but in instinct. Some things don't need to be explained, they're felt. Back in the main settlement, an older man points at the sky with a slow, deliberate gesture. Not to draw attention, everyone is already looking. He's explaining to a younger boy, perhaps a grandson, tracing the movement of the aurora with his hand. He explains how travelers of the north used the light to read weather shifts. How shepherds could interpret strange sky movements as signs of change. The boy listens with wide eyes, soaking in every word as though they're part of a slow bedtime story. Nearby, a group of women stand in a loose circle. One holds a bundle of herbs to her chest. Another tucks a stray strand of hair beneath her headscarf. They watch quietly, sharing soft breaths. A few exchange knowing glances. Not superstitious, but respectful. These lights mean more than weather tonight. They coincide with the elder's ritual. And though no one says it, everyone feels the weight of that overlap. Move closer to one longhouse doorway. A man steps out holding a wooden cup of warm ale. He sips slowly, staring upward. For him, this moment isn't mystical, just grounding. Pause at the end of a long day. A reminder that there is beauty even in harsh landscapes. The aurora thickens, moving now in slow waves like fabric floating in water. More colors start to appear. Faint streaks of soft white and hints of lavender barely touching the edges. It's gentle, dreamlike, but steady. Now breathe with this moment. Slowly. Let the calm settling over the village settle over you too. Because inside that closed room, the elder reaches the final stage of the ritual. They lift one hand, slowly, barely above their knee. Not to touch anything. Not to cast another rune. Just to signal, quietly, that they have received what they came for. A single breath leaves their lips, deeper than the rest, meaningful, final. Then the hand lowers again. The ritual is complete. But the door does not open. Not yet. Because rituals don't end with motion. They end with stillness. With letting the meaning absorb into the body like warmth soaking into cold skin. Outside, the aurora seems to pulse once, gently, as if acknowledging the moment. Then, the night grows even quieter. Something has settled. Something understood, though no one has spoken it. Soon, the elder will emerge. And what they say, or do not say, will shape the next days in ways the villagers do not yet know. The night holds its breath, not in fear, not in tension, but in that quiet, suspended way that happens when the world recognizes a moment has just shifted. The aurora still sways softly above, its pale green waves rippling like silk caught on a breeze only the sky can feel. But the settlement below grows even calmer, as though every sound is being tucked beneath a soft blanket. Let's walk deeper into this stillness. A faint chill slides across the ground. Nothing harsh, just the natural drop in temperature that comes when the last warmth of the day finally releases its grip. The grass whispers under the touch of the breeze. The wood of the longhouses creaks gently, expanding and tightening as the cold settles in. Smoke from the hearth vents lifts into the night air, merging with the shimmering sky above. The villagers sense the shift, though most don't consciously understand it. A woman ladling stew in her doorway pauses for a moment. She looks toward the ritual longhouse, her hand hovering mid-air, her breath slowing. She doesn't know why she's paused. She just feels the air change. After a heartbeat or two, she returns to her task, but her movements are quieter now. A child, half asleep in his father's lap near a dying fire, opens his eyes and turns his head toward the northern sky. He doesn't speak. Children often feel things before adults put words to them. The father smiles faintly, strokes the boy's hair, and hums a slow, deep tone, one of those old melodies passed down through generations, soft and steady like walking beside the sea. Even the animals sense something. One of the dogs lifts its head, ears perked. Doesn't growl, just listens. A horse shifts in its pen but doesn't stomp. It lowers its head, breathing slowly, its breath visible in the cold air. The goats curl deeper into their bedding. The chickens remain still, as though the night has brushed them into a deeper sleep. Now look toward the traders. They've stopped their small tasks entirely. One sits with his elbows on his knees, hands clasped loosely, eyes on the sky. Another crouches near the shore, touching the cold water with 2 fingers before rubbing them together thoughtfully. They feel the change too. Not mystical but atmospheric. Travelers know how to read the air. They can sense when something meaningful is moving through the land, even if they cannot name it. And now, turn your attention back to the longhouse with the closed back room. Inside, the elder's ritual has ended, yet the silence afterward is thick, almost physical. The ember bowl glows faintly, sending soft orange light across the carved object before them. The runes remain in place, their meanings already absorbed, their roles fulfilled. The elder sits with their spine straight, hands resting gently on their legs. Their breathing is slow, steady, balanced. The ritual has given them what they sought, but rituals like this also take something. Energy, focus, strength. So the elder allows the stillness to settle deeper, like a slow wave washing over the mind and body. Minutes pass, or perhaps only moments. It's hard to tell in this kind of silence. And, very slowly, the elder lifts their head and looks toward the closed door. Their eyes are calm, not surprised, not worried, just aware. They stand, slowly, carefully, as though the weight of the ritual sits gently on their joints. They pick up the carved object with both hands, holding it respectfully, as one would hold a newborn or a precious heirloom. The object is not large, not glittering, not dramatic, but its importance is deep, older than the settlement, older than the elder, older than memory. With a steady step, the elder approaches the door separating the ritual room from the main longhouse. Inside, life remains still, but something in the air tightens again. Just slightly, as though the moment of emergence approaches. Inside the longhouse, a single figure, perhaps the elder's daughter or a younger apprentice, sits near the hearth waiting. She has not moved for a long time. Her hands rest in her lap, her breath even. She knows not to interrupt the ritual or even to sit too near the door, but she remains close enough to hear when her mentor returns. She notices a subtle shift in the room behind her. Soft footstep, a rustle of cloth, the breathing of someone who has crossed from one mode of being into another. She doesn't turn around. Not yet. It would be disrespectful to look before the door fully opens. Outside, the aurora shimmers again, deepening to a richer green. A few villagers glance upward once more, the light reflecting softly in their eyes. The elder places one hand on the wooden door, not pushing it open, just resting there, as if acknowledging that the world on the other side is about to change. Perhaps only slightly, perhaps more. The elder knows what the runes revealed, knows what the symbols pointed toward, knows what the combination of timing, sky, and the carved object means for the coming days. But they are not rushing. Vikings did not rush wisdom. A long, steady breath leaves the elder's chest. Soft creak. The door opens. Not wide. Not dramatically. Just enough for the elder to step through, carrying the carved object in their hands. The young apprentice looks up slowly, eyes filled with patient anticipation. He says nothing. He simply waits. The elder nods once, a slow, deliberate gesture, and steps into the main room. Quiet settles again. The villagers sense the change, though none see the elder yet. Some lift their heads, some pause in their tasks, some simply breathe a bit deeper. The aurora pulses, spreading wider. And in the longhouse, the elder sets the carved object gently on a low wooden table near the hearth, where its shadows flicker in the firelight. Something has begun. Not loudly, not visibly, but undeniably. Soon, we'll see what the elder chooses to say, if anything at all. The fire in the main longhouse burns low, giving off a warm orange glow that dances across the wooden walls and the woven tapestries hanging above. Shadows stretch long and gentle, swaying with the quiet flicker of the flames. The room feels alive, but not in a loud way. More like a deep breath being held by an ancient place that knows more than it reveals. The elder stands beside the table, the newly placed carved object resting before them. Its shape, simple yet impossibly significant, catches the light in uneven ways, as though the fire itself recognizes the markings carved into it. Its shadows look older than the settlement, older than the people in it, older than the stories told by their grandparents. The apprentice sits perfectly still, eyes lowered in respect, but awareness sharpened like a blade. She's waiting for the elder's first movement, the first word, the first sign of what the ritual has revealed. For a moment the elder says nothing. They let the silence settle like slow-moving snow. Only the soft crackle of burning wood breaks the stillness. Finally, deep steady breath. Elder speaks. Tonight, they say, voice low and textured with age. The old signs returned. The apprentice doesn't gasp. She doesn't widen her eyes. She simply lifts her chin slightly, because this phrase has weight, has history. It is only spoken when something important has aligned in the sky, the wind, and the hidden language carved into their oldest relics. What did they show? The apprentice asks softly. The elder turns their gaze toward the carved object. The runes burned earlier in the ritual have cooled, but a faint line of residual warmth still clings inside the deeper grooves. The elder gently traces one groove with their finger. They spoke of movement, the elder murmurs. Not destruction, not danger, but movement. The apprentice's brow furrows. Movement of what? The elder looks toward the door, as though the answer is somewhere outside. The land, they whisper. The people. The season. Path. Something shifts soon. The apprentice slowly nods, absorbing the words like woven cloth absorbing dye. Outside, the aurora glows brighter, almost unusually bright. The green deepens into streaks of pale gold, shimmering like celestial rivers flowing across the heavens. The villagers drift toward their doorways again, drawn not by sound but by instinct. They watch the sky, murmuring softly to one another. A few children laugh, chasing the shadows on the ground shaped by the dancing light. A woman tightens her shawl around her shoulders. A fisherman tilts his head, squinting at the horizon as though expecting to see something emerge. Back inside, the elder sits down at the table, the carved object before them. The apprentice shifts to sit opposite. The elder begins unwrapping a small leather bundle, Inside are thin strips of cured hide, each etched with symbols and tiny geometric patterns. These are message strips, used to communicate decisions or warnings to other settlements when the snow is too deep for long travel. The apprentice watches with focused curiosity. "Are we sending word?" she asks. "Not yet," the elder replies. "The signs say movement is coming, but they do not say if it comes from us or toward us." The apprentice's breath catches in her throat. Not fear, just the weight of possibilities. A new trade route forming. A migration. A wandering clan seeking shelter. A natural shift. Ice cracking, forest patterns changing. Animals moving differently. Or something older. Something that stories don't always describe clearly. "What should we do?" the apprentice asks. The elder lifts their eyes. "We watch. We listen. And we prepare." Outside, the first gust of colder wind sweeps through the village, fluttering the grass and the smoke rising from chimney vents. The traders at the shoreline stand from their resting spots, looking around as though suddenly more alert. A distant thump echoes, faint like something shifting far in the forest. Not enough to alarm, but enough to be noticed by those who pay attention. Back in the longhouse, the elder places both hands around the carved object and speaks softly. "We begin at dawn." The apprentice bows her head. The fire crackles once, louder than before, and somewhere beyond the settlement, hidden by the dark and the flowing aurora, something stirs. Something that answers the movement the runes spoke of. Something quietly approaching. The dawn that arrives the next morning is softer than usual, as if the sky itself is hesitant, stretching pale light slowly over the frost-tipped grass and the roofs of the longhouses. The air carries a sharper chill, one that wraps around the village in a quiet warning. Not a threat, just a nudge. A reminder that nature moves first, always, and humans simply follow. The villagers begin to step out of their homes one by one, rubbing sleep from their eyes, drawing cloaks tighter around their shoulders. The animals sense it too. The goats are restless, shifting from side to side. The horses snort at nothing in particular. Even the chickens move with more alertness, pecking carefully instead of their usual chaotic flurry. Near the center of the settlement, the elder and the apprentice walk side by side toward the old gathering stone, a large, weathered slab that has witnessed more seasons than any living person. It's where important moments begin. Decisions, announcements, rituals, or sometimes just quiet watching. Today it is for watching. The apprentice carries a small wooden box under her arm. Inside are more carved objects, symbols of reference, memory, and teaching. She holds it carefully, almost reverently. The elder walks with slow, deliberate steps, their gaze scanning the landscape in wide arcs. The sky above is unusually clear for early morning. No clouds at all. Just a pale blue stretching endlessly, except for a thin silver shimmer low on the horizon, almost like a distant reflection off water, but there is no large water source in that direction. A few villagers notice it, murmur softly, then return to their chores. Strange sights happen often in the north. Light bends, or shifts, the world plays tricks. But the elder's eyes linger on that shimmer longer than the others. When they reach the gathering stone, the elder places one hand on its rough surface. The cold of the stone seems to reach into their palm, grounding them. "Today we watch," they remind the apprentice. The apprentice nods. "Do we watch the horizon? Or the people?" "Both," the elder answers quietly. Change speaks through many mouths. As the village stirs awake, the daily routines begin, but with small, noticeable differences. People glance around more often. Conversations trail off into thoughtful silence. Tools are moved a little closer to hand. The fisherman checking nets at the river exchange looks. Not words, not fear, not tension, just awareness. A kind of listening that requires the entire body. The apprentice sits on a small stone near the elder, and begins laying out the carved objects from the wooden box. Each symbol represents something old. Concepts the Vikings carried in their culture like quiet undercurrents. Farming cycles, weather patterns, animal migrations, travel routes, social shifts, spiritual echoes, unexplained signs. The elder watches her hands as she arranges them, noting the order she chooses. Apprentices reveal much through instinctive choices. A bird cries overhead, sharp, sudden. It's a lone raven, circling once before disappearing over the treetops. The elder tilts their head slightly. Ravens are normal here. But that one's pattern was unusual. Tighter circle, a shorter cry, a moment too deliberate. The apprentice looks up. Did you hear it? I did, the elder replies. Ravens see further than we do. The apprentice looks toward the forest where the bird vanished. Do you think it came from whatever is moving? The elder's silence is confirmation enough, but nothing else stirs. The forest stands calm. The river flows. Children gather near the shoreline to skip stones. Women begin washing clothes. Men return to repairs started the day before. Life moves on, normally. Yet the shimmer on the horizon remains. By midday it has changed shape, or stretched, or brightened. No one can quite describe it the same way. Some say it looks closer. Others say it's wider. Few say it flickers like heat. The elder stands again and takes a slow step forward, narrowing their eyes. The apprentice joins them, clutching her cloak as the wind picks up just a little, just enough to rustle the hair around her face. What do you see? She asks. The elder takes a long breath before answering. Movement, they say softly. But not from the land, not from the sky, not from the people. The apprentice waits. From the past. The elder finishes. A shiver, not from cold, runs down the apprentice's arms. The elder turns their head slightly, listening not with their ears but with something deeper, almost instinctive. Then, very faintly, something changes in the air. Vibration. Barely there. Barely real. But real enough for the elder to whisper. It has begun. And this time, even the wind seems to pause. The vibration fades almost as soon as it appears, slipping back into the stillness like a ripple settling into a glassy pond. If someone hadn't been paying close attention, they might have dismissed it as imagination, a trick of the cold air or the shifting ground beneath frozen soil. But the elder felt it, and the apprentice felt it too. Not as a sound, not as a tremor, but as something older, a nudge from time itself. The villagers don't react. They move about their tasks, unaware of the subtle shift that brushed past the edge of perception. Only the animals show the truth. Goats lifting their heads, ears twitching. Horses stepping sideways, stamping once as if shaken from a daydream. Dogs pausing mid-step to sniff the air. The elder watches them carefully. Animals sense change before we do, they murmur. The apprentice nods, following their gaze. Because they don't question it. A quiet smile touches the elder's lips, the kind only a teacher gives when a student says something wiser than expected. The shimmer on the horizon deepens as the day stretches on. No longer a thin line. It now appears like a low sheet of pale silver, bright enough to catch the corner of one's eye even when not looking directly at it. Some villagers begin noticing now, pointing, narrowing their eyes, then shrugging gently. In the north, strange lights are simply part of life. But not like this. Should we tell them? The apprentice asks. In time, the elder replies. People must sense something themselves before they can hear it from others. If we speak too early, they brush it aside. If we speak too late, they pause. Confusion becomes fear. The apprentice takes a slow breath. Nearby, two fishermen spread their nets out to dry. One pauses, looks toward the horizon, and squints with hard concentration. His companion follows his gaze. You see that? The first asks. Probably just ice light, the second replies, though his tone lacks certainty. Across the village, women spinning will pause when their spindles wobble slightly, as if a faint tremor ran through the earth but didn't quite reach their feet. They exchange brief glances, but nobody speaks. It is a day of half-noticed signs. The elder and apprentice spend most of their time near the gathering stone, observing, listening. Not for noise. Noise is obvious. They listen for shifts, patterns, interruptions in the rhythm of daily life. Because Vikings believed something important. Fate whispers before it speaks. Late in the afternoon, the elder finally sits again, resting their hands on their knees. The apprentice settles beside them, wrapping her cloak tighter as the cold deepens. "What do you think the signs mean?" she asks softly. The elder's eyes drift toward the silver shimmer. "Movement," they repeat. "Not a threat, but a change that will touch us. Something old, returning to the present." The apprentice looks down at the carved symbols spread on the ground. She hesitates, then picks one up, the one representing pathways, carved with long intersecting lines that mimic worn trails through forests. She places it at the center. The elder raises an eyebrow. "You think the path comes here?" "I think." She pauses, choosing her words with care. "I think something is choosing a path, one that leads toward us." The elder watches her a long moment. "You may be right." The wind picks up again, brushing through the grass and tugging gently at loose clothing. Smoke from nearby fires bends in one direction, then another, unsure of which way it wants to go. The sky begins to dim, shadows lengthening, the pale blue deepening into early evening gray. The shimmer on the horizon grows brighter as the sun lowers, reflecting more sharply, as though lit from behind. The villagers gather for the evening meal, forming small circles outside their homes, sharing fish, stews, bread, roasted meat. Laughter rises here and there, children playing between houses, dogs weaving through legs in search of dropped scraps. Life continues, but with threads of tension woven quietly into its fabric. By the firelight, families talk in low voices. "Did you see that light today? My goat wouldn't stop staring at the forest." The ground felt strange, just for a moment. Nobody says they're worried. Not yet. Vikings were used to unpredictability. But unpredictability had never looked quite like this. As darkness settles fully, the aurora returns. Brighter, almost restless. The greens ripple in long, sweeping motions, while faint hints of purple shimmer underneath like hidden embers. Villagers step outside to watch, pointing, murmuring. The elder and apprentice stand together near the gathering stone, heads tilted toward the dancing sky. "There," the elder whispers suddenly. "Look closely." At first, the apprentice sees nothing unusual. Until she squints. The aurora seems to be bending. Not naturally, not randomly, but bending around the silver shimmer on the horizon, as if the lights are avoiding it, respecting it, or reacting to it. A chill runs up her spine. "What does that mean?" she breathed. The elder answers without looking away. "It means the change is not from our world alone." A long pause. And then a slower, quieter breath. And somewhere far beyond the village, deeper into the forest, a sound echoes, soft but unmistakable. Hollow, distant thud. Then another, like something moving through frozen earth. Not fast, not aggressive, just coming. Night settles over the village in a way that feels thicker than usual, as though the darkness isn't just an absence of light but an extra presence, something pressing gently at the edges of everything. The rooftops, the treetops, the longhouse walls, even the breath leaving people's mouths. The fires glow warmer because of it, their orange light trembling like small, determined hearts beating against the cold. The elder stands at the wooden threshold of the longhouse now, watching the horizon with a stillness that almost blends them into the shadows. The apprentice is beside them, wrapped tightly in her cloak, trying to match the elder's calm but unable to stop the slight tremor in her fingers. The silver shimmer is brighter in the dark, no longer faint, no longer distant. It spreads slowly across the lower edge of the sky like thin frost growing across a windowpane. Above it, the aurora twists, curls, bends, not dancing freely anymore but moving in long, cautious arcs, as though circling something unseen. The villagers begin noticing this too. Groups gather silently between houses, their words hushed. The older ones stand with arms folded, brows furrowed. Younger ones hold torches tighter. Children cling to parents' legs, sensing the unspoken tension more than understanding it. Then there it is again. A soft, low, muffled, but real. The ground absorbs most of the vibration, but it travels just enough through the earth to reach the soles of their feet like a small heartbeat beneath the land. The elder's eyes narrow. "That's closer," the apprentice whispers. "Yes." The elder steps forward, scanning the forest edge. The sound didn't come from the horizon. It came from the hidden depths of the trees, the thick pines that form the natural border of their settlement. The forest stands silent now, motionless in the cold night air, the branches like dark silhouettes reaching upward. Another sound. Not a thud this time. Shift, drag, quiet push of earth. The apprentice inhales sharply, but the elder lifts one hand in a gesture of calm. "Steady," they murmur. Change walks on quiet feet. The villagers gather closer now, forming a wide half-circle behind the elder. No panic, no shouting. Viking life taught them silence before reaction, observation before assumption. A hunter steps forward, bow in hand, though not drawn. "Should we send someone into the trees?" he asks in a low voice. The elder shakes their head. "No, we do not chase what approaches. If it wished to hide, it would. If it wished to strike, it would not announce itself." The hunter nods slowly. The apprentice swallows, feeling her pulse in her throat. What could it be? The elder stares into the dark line of the forest, their voice barely above breath. "Old things tend to return when the sky begins to behave strangely." The villagers shift uneasily at that, though nobody argues. In their world, history wasn't just the past. It was something that could rise, walk, warn, or remind. A long silence falls over them. Wind rustles the treetops. The aurora above bends again, this time visibly pulled toward the silver shimmer, as though some kind of unseen gravity tugs at its threads. The colors stretch thin, then gather again, fluttering like fabrics caught in opposing winds. A woman near the back gasps softly. "The lights, they're changing shape." Another villager murmurs, "I've never seen them bend like that." The elder steps closer to the forest line, stopping just before the first shadowed branches. Their breath clouds in front of them, rising slowly. They close their eyes for a moment, listening, not to the trees but to the space between. The apprentice watches them closely. "What do you hear?" she asks quietly. The elder opens their eyes again. "A path," they answer. "Being walked." The apprentice's voice tightens. "By whom?" The elder tilts their head, considering the darkness, the vibrations, the sky, the signs from the runes earlier. Then they speak the words slowly, deliberately. "Someone who remembers us, even if we have forgotten them." A ripple of murmur spreads through the villagers, soft but sharp. The elder lifts a hand to calm them. "Not a threat," they add quickly. "Not yet. This feels like an arrival." The apprentice looks at the ground, the forest, the sky, trying to trace the invisible patterns the elder seems to understand. "Why the shimmer on the horizon?" she asks. The elder's eyes lift to it. "That," they say, "is not the arrival." They turn toward the forest once more. "That is the consequence." Another sound emerges from the darkness, this one clearer, faint dragging step. Another. Then the crack of a thin branch under weight. The villagers tense, though no one moves backward. Vikings did not fear the unknown. They respected it, analyzed it, prepared for it. Fear came only when understanding did. The elder takes one more step toward the trees. "The first thing that emerges," they say quietly, "will tell us what the change wants." The apprentice's breath catches. The forest grows impossibly still. The aurora freezes mid-motion like a held breath. And in the hush, deep, heavy, watching, the outline of something begins to appear between the trees. Shape, low, moving toward them. Not rushing, not hiding, simply approaching. The shape emerging between the trees is small enough that, for a heartbeat, the villagers collectively loosen their shoulders. Not a giant, not a creature, not a threat leaping out of the darkness. But the relief is brief because the way it moves is not like a person walking with purpose. Drift, hesitates, pauses, as if deciding with every step whether it belongs to this world or another. The elder's eyes sharpen. The apprentice leans forward slightly, her breath caught in her throat. The villagers behind them stand perfectly still, not out of fear but out of respect. In the Old North, silence was not emptiness. Silence was readiness. The shape crosses from deep shadow into the faint firelight spilling from the village center. And at last, the figure becomes clear. Child. A small boy, no older than 6 or 7 winters. Barefoot. Wrapped in a thin wool tunic far too large for him, dragging along the ground. His hair is long, tangled, hanging across his eyes. Frost clings to the ends of his sleeves like beads of glass. And his skin, pale in a way that isn't sickness or fear, but something colder. Something that has been touched by more than winter. The apprentice's hand flies to her mouth. The elder takes a slow, steady step toward him. The boy stops. His shoulders rise and fall quickly, as though breathing after running a long way. Yet, there is no sound of another step behind him. No parent, no sibling, no hunter. No tracks of travel visible on the frost-covered ground. He came alone. The villagers exchange soft murmurs. The elder raises a hand, silencing them without a word. Children appearing from the forest was not unheard of. But children appearing during signs, during sky shifts, during ground vibrations, that was different. That belonged to the old stories. The whispers shared around hearths in dark winters. The child lifts his head slowly, revealing eyes that reflect the firelight in a strange way. Not glowing, not unnatural, just too bright, too aware. The elder kneels down so they are level with the boy's gaze. "What is your name?" the elder asks gently. The boy swallows. His voice is quiet, hoarse, like it hasn't been used in days. I don't know." A soft ripple of alarm moves through the villagers. The apprentice steps closer unconsciously. "You don't remember?" the elder asks softly, not pressing, simply observing. The boy shakes his head. "I woke up in the trees." The elder studies him carefully. "Do you know why you came here?" Again the boy shakes his head. Slowly this time, uncertainty settling into his features. "I just walked. I didn't know where I was going. My feet, they knew." The apprentice glances at the elder. The elder does not look away from the boy. "Your feet brought you to us," the elder murmurs. "Then you are meant to be here." The boy blinks, eyes flicking past the elder toward the village. Not with recognition, but with curiosity, as though he understands the shape of things but not the meaning. "Are you cold?" the apprentice asks softly. The boy hesitates, then whispers, "No." The villagers look at one another again. No boots, thin clothes, frost in his hair, and no cold. The elder speaks again, voice low but strong enough for those behind to hear. "Bring a cloak. And water." A woman hurries forward, wrapping a thick wool cloak around the boy's shoulders. He doesn't flinch, doesn't shy away, just accepts it quietly. When he drinks, his hands tremble, but his eyes remain fixed on something beyond the villagers, toward the horizon, toward that silver shimmer. The apprentice notices this. She kneels beside the elder and whispers, "He's looking at the light." The elder nods slowly. "Because the light brought him here." The apprentice's eyes widen. "You mean he came from it?" "No," the elder says calmly. "Nothing mortal comes from light like that." But he may have been guided by it. The apprentice feels a chill even beneath her cloak. The boy sets the cup down with slightly shaking hands. "Am I in danger?" The elder places a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "No, not here." The villagers relax a bit. A child seeking protection is something they understand deeply. But then, the boy adds something else. His voice tiny, barely a whisper. But something else is. A long, heavy silence falls. The apprentice leans in. "What do you mean?" The boy's eyes drift again to that silver haze on the horizon. The aurora bends around it like a bowstring pulled tight. His voice trembles, not from fear of the villagers, but from something he has seen or felt. "I heard it," he whispers. "Before I woke." The elder's heartbeat slows, attentive. "What did you hear?" The boy looks down, jaw trembling. "A crack." He takes a breath. Like something breaking. Another breath. Something big. The elder's eyes darken with understanding. The apprentice whispers, "The land." The boy shakes his head. "No." He lifts his gaze again, and this time his voice is steady. Too steady for a child his age. "Not the land." He looks directly at the elder as he says it. "The sky." The villagers freeze. The apprentice feels her pulse in her fingers. The elder closes their eyes for a moment. Sky crack. A break not of noise but of meaning. Old stories spoke of it, but only in fragments, warnings passed down through generations. The shimmer on the horizon brightens, as if responding. The forest behind the boy exhales a soft wind. And for a moment, everything, every voice, every thought, every sound, goes still. Because the sky cracking was never meant to be witnessed. Not in this age. Not by these people. Not without consequence. The elder opens their eyes slowly. "It has chosen to begin," they whisper. And far above them, the aurora shivers, folding inward like a curtain being drawn back, revealing a darkness behind it that no one has seen before. "All right, just settle back again. Let the room get a little quieter. Let the air get a little heavier, and we'll slip right back into that long, steady rhythm of old Nordic life, where nothing ever moves too fast, yet everything quietly matters. You've been following along patiently, batch by batch, so just ease yourself into this next stretch. No rush. No pressure. Only the slow unfolding of how Vikings actually lived, in the calmest, most realistically detailed way possible." So, where were we? We were drifting through the inside of ordinary Viking lives, moving past their homes, their food, their winter routines, their crafts. And now, in this batch, imagine the darker, colder months settling in fully. The days get short, very short. The kind of short that affects your mood if you're not used to it. Vikings didn't have to think about this. It was simply the rhythm of their world. The sun would slide away early, almost shy, and you'd find yourself spending more and more time indoors, with a soft glow of firelight painting everything in amber. Inside those long houses, every person's role became even more important as winter deepened. The weaving never stopped. The tools never went untouched. Repairs were constant, because one broken handle, one cracked shield rim, one split board in the roof could become a real problem if ignored. And so, while the storms pushed against the outside walls, inside you'd hear steady, calm, repetitive sounds. Scraping, whittling, spinning, twisting threads, the creak of wooden looms, the soft thud of someone setting down a tool after hours of use. The old sagas talk about feasting and drama, but most of life was made of these quiet stretches. Long meals, slow storytelling, people passing down memories because there wasn't much else to fill the long evenings. Someone might talk about their parents. Someone else might retell a moment from their travels. Even the children listened because these weren't just stories. They were explanations for how the world worked, how a person should behave, what honor meant, what danger looked like, what patience felt like. And there was a kind of togetherness. Families slept close to each other. Animals settled at the far end of the hall, giving off warmth. You could smell wood smoke settling into every strand of fabric and every spot of hair. You could hear wind slipping through tiny gaps in the walls, but you also knew the community itself. Your family, your neighbors, your clan, were the real insulation that kept everything running. During this period, one thing Vikings were especially careful about was food rationing. They couldn't waste anything. They stored grains, dried fish, salted meat, and every person knew how much remained. You didn't simply take what you wanted. Someone in the household always knew the count, usually the woman managing the household economy. Icelandic sagas often describe women as the organizers and decision-makers in these matters. Not because of some romanticized idea, but because it was practical. They were good at it. And winter demanded discipline. You might imagine a quiet evening where someone ladles out a thin stew, mostly broth, with bits of meat from an earlier autumn slaughter. Everyone accepts it without complaint. Not because they're stoic heroes, but because they've lived their whole lives with a sharp understanding of scarcity. They knew spring was months away. They knew that failing to ration meant failing to survive. And while all this quiet, steady rhythm played out, the sea didn't sleep either. Even in winter, some men still had to check their boats, haul in whatever small catches they could, or inspect the shoreline for damage after storms. They'd return with wet cloaks, their faces stinging from cold winds, stepping into the dim warmth of the longhouse where everyone else had been breathing the same warm air all day. It must have felt almost shocking, the sudden shift from freezing wind to the thick, smoky warmth indoors. You can imagine them shaking snow from their shoulders, hanging up cloaks near the fire, rubbing their hands to bring feeling back, sitting down heavily while someone passes them a wooden cup of something warm. Not luxury, just relief. And in these winter months, quiet rituals also became more important. Not grand ceremonies. More like simple habits rooted in old beliefs. A person might place a carved wooden figurine near the hearth. Another might say a short, private prayer before a meal. The Vikings were spiritual, but not always in big theatrical ways. Much of their belief lived in gestures, in respect for natural forces, in gratitude for surviving another storm. Children learned these things slowly by watching. They absorbed the way adults spoke about the cold, the sea, the gods, the unseen forces that shaped the world. They weren't told in a dramatic tone. It was more like someone speaking in a low, matter-of-fact voice while stirring a pot or mending a strap. The sacred and the ordinary blended together. And always there were responsibilities. A Viking winter wasn't restful. It was simply slower. Every person had a job. Young ones fetched water. Older ones tended to tools. Women managed stores and clothing. Men repaired whatever needed attention. Elders gave advice. No one sat idle for long because idle time usually led to problems. And everyone knew problems multiplied in winter. Even animals had their routines shaped carefully. Horses needed to be fed from precious hay supplies. Sheep and goats needed sheltered corners. Their health was watched closely because losing one animal meant losing more than meat. It meant losing wool, hides, milk, and future offspring. Everything was connected. And on some nights, when the sky cleared after a storm, you can picture the entire household stepping outside for a moment, bracing against the cold, squinting up at the deep blue-black sky. They'd see the aurora, flickering quietly like a slow-moving curtain of pale green or faint red. They didn't understand it scientifically, but they respected it. Some thought it was the armor of the Valkyries. Some thought it was a sign of battles happening far above. Some simply watched without naming it because not everything needed a name to be meaningful. Then they'd file back inside, closing the wooden door, letting the wind fade behind them. Life went on like that, quietly, predictably, and all the while the world outside changed little by little. Snow deepened, ice thickened, but inside people stayed warm, busy, and connected. Each hour passed slowly, but each hour also carried them one step closer to spring. And somewhere in that winter calm, in that smoky longhouse hum, something subtle began shifting in the thoughts of certain families. A tiny idea forming, a decision that would change the rhythm of their future. All right, just let your shoulders loosen a little. Let your breath fall into that slow, steady pattern again, and we'll drift back into the long, dim warmth of Viking life, right where we left it. Everything continues in that calm, almost hypnotic pace. Nothing rushed, nothing dramatic. Just the quiet truth of how they actually lived, revealed piece by simple piece. So, winter is still settled deep across the land. It's that stage where the snow isn't new anymore, where it's compacted, familiar, part of the background the way dust or sand becomes in warmer climates. People move across it with ease now, their boots leaving prints that layer over older ones, paths carved simply by repetition. There's no need to think about it. The rhythm is built into their bodies. Inside the longhouse the work continues. And one thing that becomes really noticeable in these months is the influence of storytelling. Not the stylized saga versions we read today, but the ordinary, nightly stories passed down in families. These were softer, calmer, sometimes about ancestors, sometimes about everyday lessons. A person might describe how their father taught them to carve a certain pattern, or how their mother used to test the sharpness of a blade, or how a neighbor once saved a calf during a blizzard. These weren't stories for entertainment, they were tools. Teaching tools. Memory tools. Social glue. A Viking child learned the values of their community through these little moments shared over the fire. Patience, responsibility, courage, respect, and an awareness that life was fragile enough to require constant care. Someone in the home might be good at recalling small details, like the smell of a certain harbor, or how a mountain looked in a distant summer. Their voice would stay low, steady, slow, almost like the sound of a millstone turning. And while their words filled the air, others kept working with their hands. A woman spinning wool wouldn't pause. A man scraping a piece of wood smooth wouldn't stop. The storytelling simply flowed around the labor. This was how knowledge moved from generation to generation. And while families sat together in this quiet cycle, something else became clear. Viking households weren't isolated. Even in winter, even in hard conditions, they were part of a broader web of relationships. Nearby farms or homesteads remained connected. People visited occasionally. Not often, but enough to remind each other that they weren't alone in the cold. These visits had a practical side. Someone might need a specific tool to borrow. Someone might bring news about a sick animal or a new child born. Someone might check on an elderly relative living in another household. And these moments reinforced the idea that Viking survival depended on cooperation as much as strength. Picture two neighbors meeting halfway between their homes, bundled in cloaks, breath forming little clouds. They exchange a few words, not loud ones, because shouting feels unnecessary in the quiet of snow-covered fields. They talk about feed supplies, or whether the ice on the river is stable, or which day they're planning to slaughter a sheep. Then they go back to their homes, each carrying a little bit of shared reassurance. And inside the longhouse, the day moves on. You might hear a pot crack slightly from the heat. Someone taps a wooden bucket to check if it needs repair. A dog stretches, shakes, curls up again. Chickens rustle softly in their corner. The fire pops, sending tiny sparks upward but catching nothing. These small sounds are so consistent that after a while they fade into a kind of background heartbeat. Low, steady, familiar. And in this winter calm, a surprising amount of planning takes place. With so much outdoor work reduced, families begin thinking ahead to spring. They calculate how much seed they'll need, how many tools require replacing, which fields will be plowed first, who must travel where to trade or gather supplies. This wasn't dramatic strategy. It was simply the practical thinking needed to survive. And among these conversations, something else often surfaced. Travel plans. Not every family planned journeys, but enough did that it became woven into the winter rhythm. Some men or women needed to visit distant markets when the weather warmed. Others planned to join trading voyages. And a few, just a few, began discussing the possibility of longer ventures. Not raids, not sudden decisions. Just small, slow considerations about opportunities beyond the settlements. These discussions didn't dominate the household, but they lingered. Someone sharpening a blade might quietly mention hearing that a distant region had better timber. Someone feeding the livestock might recall a story of a far-off harbor. Someone mending clothing might wonder aloud whether certain dyes could be traded in towns across the sea. Not excitement, not ambition, just seeds of thought drifting through the smoky air. And with every passing day, the sun lingered a little longer on the horizon, barely noticeable at first, but enough that people felt it instinctively. Enough that animals behaved a little differently. Enough that tasks slowly shifted in preparation for the next season. And deep inside these longhouses, in that steady calming rhythm of real Viking life, an idea was quietly taking shape. A decision certain families would eventually act on. Quiet intention. A direction forming the way ice cracks slowly before it breaks. Would it lead them to new shores? Would it keep them rooted to familiar land? Would it pull someone away from the comfort of this slow, still winter world? Those answers were waiting just ahead. Forming. Almost ready. All right. Just ease yourself back into that soft, low, almost sleepy rhythm again. Let your breathing slow down. Let the space around you feel a little quieter, and we'll continue drifting through the real, steady day-to-day life of the Vikings, exactly as it unfolded across those long winters and into the first hints of spring. Because now, as the season begins its slow turn, everything in Viking society shifts in this almost invisible, gradual way. No sudden change. No dramatic signal. Just the tiniest details, like how the light falls at a slightly different angle through the carved wooden doorway, or how the snow softens around the edges, or how the drips from the roof begin earlier in the day. The people felt these changes before they ever thought about them. Their bodies registered it long before anyone said a word. Inside the longhouse, those quiet winter tasks still continue, but now they're accompanied by a kind of anticipation. Not excitement. Vikings weren't rushing toward anything. But there was a sense of preparing the world for movement again. Tools needed to be checked one more time. Rope tightened. Wooden handles refitted. Clothing inspected for wear. Children reminded gently but firmly that spring chores would require early waking again. One of the biggest transitions during this time was livestock care. As the days lengthened, people had to pay close attention to their animals' conditions after long months indoors. A cow that had eaten a little too much or too little. A ewe that might be pregnant. A horse that needed brushing and exercise. These little tasks added up, and each one mattered. Livestock were wealth. Losing an animal was never taken lightly. Imagine the sound of hooves shifting on the straw-covered floor. Someone brushing a horse's neck in slow, repetitive strokes. A child holding a bucket while an older family member checks a sheep's hooves. These were not dramatic chores. Just necessary ones. Quiet, steady, grounding. And as the animals were tended, the fields outside began to slowly reveal themselves from beneath the layers of snow. The Vikings didn't farm vast flat plains. They farmed patches of workable land, using whatever soil they had. In Norway and Iceland especially, terrain was rocky, uneven, stubborn. People respected the land because it gave only what it could, nothing more. Planting wasn't done carelessly. It was planned down to the handful. So you might picture a man standing near a thawing patch of earth. His cloak pulled tightly around him, testing the soil with the tip of a wooden staff, looking at how water pooled, feeling the ground, knowing from memory which spots warmed first and which held frost longer. Nothing rushed. Just the slow assessment of the world waking back up. Back inside, the women of the household were also preparing for the shift. Clothing stores were reviewed. Winter-worn garments patched again. Spring garments checked for moth damage. Tools for dairy work inspected. Bowls, churns, and buckets arranged so they would be ready when animals began producing milk again. Quiet tasks, measured and careful. And every evening as the fire crackled, conversations drifted toward the spring work. And quietly toward the possibility of travel. This wasn't something dramatic or adventurous the way modern movies portray it. It was practical. Vikings traveled to trade, to gather resources, to visit family in distant places, to maintain alliances. Long journeys were discussed piece by piece. A man might mention that he heard someone in a different settlement was seeking iron tools. Someone else might say that a relative in a nearby region was preparing to sell surplus grain. These weren't dramatic declarations, more like a slow, thoughtful weaving of possibilities. Each person knew the risks of travel. Storms, illness, accidents, unpredictable seas. So decisions were never taken lightly. You could imagine someone staring into the fire, their voice low as they speak about a place they visited years ago, describing a sheltered harbor, or a market with useful goods, or a distant community where the soil was better than at home. Their words weren't meant to inspire excitement. They were meant to provide memory, information, perspective. And while these talks continued, Ship maintenance slowly returned as a priority. Even in winter, people occasionally checked on their boats, but now those checks became more urgent. Wood swells and shrinks in cold weather. Rope stiffens. Tar cracks. A Viking ship wasn't just a vessel, it was the lifeline tying communities together. So when the thaw began, people walked down to the shoreline, clearing ice from around their boats, inspecting the hulls, tapping the planks, running fingers over seams. Nothing romantic, just careful work. The smell of wet wood, cold salt, and thawing earth filled the air. Someone might crouch beside a boat, examining a small split in the wood, knowing it would need repair long before summer. Another person might test the weight of an oar, checking for warping. Repairs weren't rushed. They were done with quiet concentration. And back at the longhouse, the faint, distant sound of dripping snow would echo against the wooden walls. People grew more active. Small tasks multiplied. A new rhythm set in. And somehow, beneath all these motions, something subtle kept forming. A collective awareness that the stillness of winter was ending, and with that ending came choices. Some families would remain rooted, tending fields and managing households. Others would travel only a little, visiting nearby settlements. But a few, just a few, were beginning to lean toward greater distances. Not in a sudden, dramatic declaration, but in small ways, sharpening a specific knife, inspecting a piece of clothing, checking a tool more carefully, glancing toward the shoreline while walking outside. The decision wasn't ready yet, but it was building, quietly, steadily, like a tide rising beneath the ice. All right, just relax back into that slow, steady pace again. Let the world around you soften. Let the tension fall from your shoulders, and we'll step quietly back into the lives of those old northern families, moving gently from the fading grip of winter into the early stirrings of spring, following the Vikings exactly as they lived. Slow, practical, calm, and very, very human. Because now, as the cold begins loosening its hold, life inside the longhouse changes in ways that aren't loud or obvious, but you feel them deeply. People begin waking earlier. The fire burns a little hotter in the mornings. The air smells less of smoke and more of melting frost. Tools that sat untouched for months are lifted again. Heavier now, stiff from the cold, but ready to return to work. The women of the household take the lead in organizing the transition. They check storage chests with careful hands, feeling for dampness, looking for anything spoiled or moldy. They measure grain supplies, calculating whether the family will reach the first harvest. They sort wool and linen, deciding which pieces must be woven before the heavy tasks of summer begin. Every motion is quiet, practiced, and necessary. Meanwhile, the men begin to repair the exterior of the longhouse. Wind, snow, and ice always take a toll. So you might picture one man climbing onto the sloped roof, tying himself with a rope for safety, slowly replacing the cracked sod or patched thatch. Another stands at the side of the house, tightening the wooden beams, strengthening the frame for storms that might still arrive unexpectedly. Small repairs, but everyone matters. And then there are the children, moving between chores with a mix of reluctance and energy. They carry small bundles of straw, fetch water from half-thawed streams, scrub wooden bowls, or help brush the animals. They learn by doing, not by being instructed from afar. They watch the adults carefully. How they hold a tool, how they gauge the weather, how they maintain steady movements even when the tasks are dull or repetitive. These children grow into the roles they witness. And outside, the land keeps shifting. The ice on the rivers begins to crack, not all at once, but in slow, echoing groans that carry across the valleys. The snow becomes slush. The ground softens underfoot. People walk more carefully now, because the mud can pull at boots, and the softened ground hides sharp stones. But these signs of early spring carry a quiet sense of promise. It's during this time that neighbors visit more frequently. They discuss planting times. They compare the survival rates of their animals. They share information about markets and trade. They talk in low voices, calm and steady, the way people do when the situation is familiar but still requires attention. Some of these talks drift toward broader subjects. News from settlements beyond their immediate area. Rumors of someone discovering better grazing land. Reports of a trader returning with new goods. Whispers that a distant region had a mild winter, which might mean better trade opportunities. All conveyed without urgency, simply as part of the ongoing flow of information that helped the community plan. And quietly, steadily, the subject of travel grows more frequent. A man might mention, almost casually, that he heard about a group preparing a ship for the summer trading season. Another might say he's considering joining a short voyage to acquire iron nails or foreign cloth. A woman might talk about needing dyes that only come from distant markets. These aren't grand dreams, they're practical needs. The idea of travel grows gently, like water rising beneath ice sheets. Not rushing, not booming, just steadily increasing. And with that rising thought comes increased attention to the ships. The Vikings took ship maintenance seriously because a seaworthy vessel wasn't just a matter of pride, it was life or death. So now you can imagine people walking down to the shoreline more often. They scrape away the last of the winter ice. They test the flexibility of the wood. They rub a hand along the planks, feeling for swelling or cracks. They check the oars one by one, lifting them, testing their weight. Tar pots are warmed slowly, the thick smell soaking into the air. Someone applies it in long, even strokes, sealing the gaps in the hull. Another person checks the ropes, twisting, tightening, replacing the frayed ones. The boats begin to look more alive again, as if waking from their own winter rest. Near the boats, the shoreline becomes busier. People set up small wooden frames to dry nets. They check fishing tools. They prepare small bundles of supplies to be kept ready, just in case. Because in Viking life, readiness wasn't an option, it was a necessity. And through all this steady motion, certain conversations linger longer than others. A quiet talk between two brothers about a market across the sea. A low discussion between spouses about whether a short trading trip could benefit the family this year. A father speaking in a gentle voice to his eldest child, explaining what it truly means to join a voyage. Not the glamour, not the sagas, but the cold, the wind, the uncertainty, the responsibility. These conversations aren't dramatic, but they settle in the air like soft smoke. They mean something is shifting. Something is edging toward a decision. Inside the longhouse, the fire burns steadily while people prepare for the next season. Outside, the earth grows softer, the boats grow stronger, and the world grows wider in the minds of certain families. Not yet action, not yet departure, but the thought of movement, the thought of traveling beyond the familiar. It grows every day, quiet and steady, almost unnoticed, until one morning, someone steps outside, looks toward the shoreline, and lingers a little longer than usual, not deciding, just feeling that something is coming, something real, something close. All right. Just let yourself ease back into that same soft, steady rhythm again. The calm tone, the gentle drifting feeling you've been following since the very first batch, because now we're slipping deeper into the real Viking world, moving from early spring into the slow awakening of the working season, where life becomes fuller, but never rushed, never loud. Always practical, always grounded in the rhythms of survival. By this time of year, the longhouse isn't as dark as before. The mornings stretch a little wider, and the evenings settle a little later. People feel the change in their bones before they even look outside. The air still has a bite, but it carries hints of earth and grass now. When someone steps out early in the morning, they can smell the difference. The smell of thawing soil, the smell of wood drying, the smell of moisture drifting off the last patches of melting snow. Inside, the fire is still central, but it's no longer struggling against the full force of winter cold. People move around with more ease. Someone lifts a wooden lid to check dried fish supplies. Someone else shakes out a cloak, brushing off the last lingering dust of winter. Threads of wool hang from beams, ready to be woven into new garments before the summer's hardest work begins. And one of the biggest transitions now is how the animals behave. They sense spring before humans do. They grow restless. Horses stamp more. Sheep bleat more loudly, sniffing the air. Goats tug at their ropes, eager for fresh grazing. People respond to this shift automatically, the way they learn from childhood. Checking fences, clearing debris, preparing small enclosures for when the animals are ready to move out for the first time. Farmers walk the land carefully now. They test the ground with their boots. They clear small stones from fields. They break the thin crust of frost that lingers in shaded spots. Every area of workable soil is precious, especially in places like Norway or Iceland where farmland isn't abundant. These early steps don't look dramatic. They're small, slow, repetitive actions, but each one shapes the season's success. You might imagine a man bending low to inspect a patch of earth, the wind brushing against his cloak, or a woman carrying a wooden basket, gathering small branches blown loose during storms. Nothing heroic, just the simple, patient work that sustains a household. And while the adults prepare the land, the children feel the change too. They're sent on slightly longer tasks now, gathering water from the river, collecting firewood from exposed patches of forest floor, helping spread old straw to dry. They start teasing each other again the way children do when the world feels less harsh. But even while they play, they learn. They carry messages between households. They listen quietly when adults talk about planting schedules. They observe how tools are handled, how soil is judged, how animals are released and controlled. This learning through observation was a core part of Viking life, not taught through long lectures, but through presence. And now the conversations about travel grow a little more focused. Still soft. Still measured. Still without any dramatic flair. A spouse asks another whether they've checked the boat's lower hull for swelling. A neighbor mentions that someone inland has goods to trade. Iron nails, wool cloth, small trinkets imported through earlier routes. Someone else recalls that a distant settlement might need timber this season, and their own homestead has a little extra to spare. These aren't decisions. They're building blocks, quiet ones, practical ones. A family might sit together after the evening meal, the fire low, discussing things in that calm, unhurried tone the Vikings often used for serious matters. A man might say he's considering joining a short coastal voyage, not across the open sea, just along familiar coastline to trade grain or fish. A woman might weigh the risk, thinking of the household responsibilities, the timing of planting, the weather patterns. Their voices remain steady. Their eyes stay focused on the fire. The decision is shared, not forced. Meanwhile, the boats continue receiving careful attention. The Vikings didn't take chances with their ships. They had seen what the sea could do. Storms that came without warning, winds that turned gentle waves into walls, cold water that pulled a person under with terrifying speed. So maintenance was like a ritual. Someone heats tar in a small cauldron, stirring slowly as the thick scent spreads. Another presses the tar into the seams with a smooth wooden tool. Oars are tested again, lifted, turned, inspected. Few planks are replaced. A few nails hammered deeper. Someone runs their hand along the prow, feeling the grain of the wood, thinking about journeys past. And during these early spring days, you can imagine people walking along the shoreline more often, not because they've decided anything, but because the sea itself naturally draws attention this time of year. The thaw changes the sound of the waves. The wind carries salt differently. Birds return, circling above the water in restless patterns. All these small details signal movement. And movement makes people think of possibilities. In some households, the idea of travel becomes more personal. Maybe a young man wants to prove himself by joining a trading trip. Maybe an older man wants to revisit a place he once knew. Maybe a woman has family across the sea and wonders whether she might send messages or goods with a traveling group. Nothing rushed. Nothing forced. Just quiet threads of possibility weaving through the household. And as these thoughts accumulate, the rhythm of daily life grows busier. Tools are organized. Packs are checked. Fields are studied. Roofs are repaired. Animals fed. Nets mended. Each task pulling the people forward step by step. And beneath all of this, there is a feeling. Small pull. A subtle shift in the air. Not a decision. Not yet. but the sense that the season is preparing people for something more than just routine work. Something slightly beyond the edges of their familiar world. Something waiting just out of sight, like a path hidden beneath the soft earth. Just sink back into that slow, soft flow again. The same gentle rhythm we've been holding since the beginning. No rush, no pressure. Just the calm unraveling of real Viking life, step by step, breath by breath. Because now we're moving deeper into spring, when everything becomes fuller and heavier with work, yet still carries that quiet, grounded energy the Viking world was built on. By this point in the year, the longhouse feels different. The air inside isn't as smoky or heavy as winter air. People prop the door open more often, letting the daylight spill in, letting the breeze push away the old winter scent of trapped breath and burnt wood. You might imagine the flicker of the fire merging with the pale brightness outside, creating that soft mixture of warm orange and cool white across the floorboards. Daily routines lengthen. People sleep a little less, rise a little earlier, move a little quicker. Not out of haste, but because spring demands movement. The ground is thawed enough to begin preparations, but still wet enough that work must be timed carefully. Too early and you ruin the soil. Too late and you fall behind. So the men and women work together in quiet coordination, each knowing their part without loud instructions. Someone carries seed sacks closer to the fields. Someone sharpens the wooden plows. Someone checks the ox harnesses. Someone clears drainage paths where melted snow collected. All of this is done in near silence, broken only by low voices, the scrape of tools, and the steady rhythm of footsteps on soft ground. And while the adults work, the children begin real spring training. They learn how to guide animals through narrow field paths. They learn how to carry loads without spilling. They learn how to spot damp patches that might sink a wagon wheel. These are small skills but essential ones. Viking life wasn't built on sudden heroics. It was built on generations learning these quiet, practical details. Meanwhile, the animals become more active every day. Horses are led outside more often to stretch and graze on early grass. Sheep are moved to slightly larger enclosures. Chickens scratch eagerly at the thawed earth. Goats nibble at the first green shoots. Each animal movement has to be managed carefully. Not too far, not too early, not too long. A family that lost control of its animals risked losing critical resources. And while all this is happening, the conversations around travel start to take clearer shape. Not fully decided, not dramatic, just more defined. Someone might mention that a nearby settlement is preparing 2 ships for a trading run later in the season. Someone else might say that iron is low this year and needs to be obtained from coastal markets. Another person might remind everyone that cloth is running thin and must be replenished. These practical needs begin to gently shape the season's decisions. In the evenings, after long days of labor, people gather again around the fire. The room is still noisy with small tasks, threading needles, carving small wooden pieces, cleaning tools, but the conversations drift naturally toward what lies ahead. A spouse might quietly ask, "Do you think the boat will be ready before the next moon?" Another might answer, "If the weather stays steady, maybe." No urgency, no raised voices, just that soft, slow exchange of possibilities. And now, as the ground dries further, ship work intensifies. The shoreline feels different at this time of year. Busier, more purposeful. Picture a man crouching beside a ship's keel, running his palm along the wood, feeling the firmness return as the cold releases its grip. Another person stands knee-deep in cold, clear water, steadying the boat while adjustments are made. Nets are hung to dry on wooden frames. The rhythmic sound of hammering carries across the open air. And not just men. Women assist too, carrying materials, checking cloth sails for wear, mending any tears from the previous season. Sails were incredibly valuable, made from woven wool and expensive to replace. Every stitch mattered. And little by little, the boats begin to look ready again. Not fully prepared yet, but awake. Back at the longhouse, subtle preparations begin. Someone sets aside certain pieces of equipment. Someone folds extra clothing that might be needed if travel becomes certain. Someone inspects small personal tools, Knives, pouches, flint pieces, making sure everything is functional. These aren't travel bags yet. They're just signs. Signs that the idea is no longer vague, but taking form. Meanwhile, the longhouse energy changes again. People seem slightly more alert, more watchful, not worried, just attentive. The season demands more awareness. Tools must be in perfect condition. Fields must be ready. Boats must be safe. Supplies must be counted. And beneath all this, a quiet current begins to run through certain households. A sense that this year might bring something different. A journey. Perhaps a short one. Or perhaps slightly farther than usual. Still close to the familiar coast, but far enough to bring new goods, new stories, new opportunities. Nothing is decided yet, but the air feels like it's holding a question. Soft one. Patient one. A question that seems to whisper at the edge of morning light, just before the day begins. A question waiting for the right moment to be answered. All right, settle back again. Keep that same slow, grounded Viking rhythm we've been building. Nothing rushed, nothing forced. Just letting the season unfold naturally, the way real life did for them, one quiet detail at a time. Because now we're entering the heart of spring, where the days stretch longer, the ground grows firmer, and the longhouse begins to feel like a place balanced between two worlds. One world rooted in the land, the other world beginning to lean toward the sea. Inside the longhouse, the morning atmosphere has a different texture now. When people wake, the air is cool but not cold. The first breath they take is no longer smoky. It's clean, carrying the faint scent of damp earth drifting through the doorway. Light filters in earlier than before, painting the inside of the hall with soft gold rather than winter gray. Breakfasts are quicker. Not rushed, just purposeful. A few mouthfuls of porridge, a drink of buttermilk, maybe a slice of smoked fish. Enough to fuel the work ahead without slowing the rhythm of the day. And once everyone steps outside, the busyness of spring deepens. Fields are almost ready for sowing, so people walk the perimeter with careful eyes. They press their boots into the soil, testing firmness. They look at the color of the earth, the moisture levels, the way the frost has lifted. Experienced farmers could read the land like a map. One glance told them if the season was on their side. Meanwhile, wooden tools are being repaired for the final time before the planting begins. Long-handled hoes, spades, wooden plows, big. Every single one has to be dependable, because once the sowing starts, there's no time to stop. Children help in small but essential ways, gathering the lighter tools, fetching water, keeping the animals back from the work areas. This is how they learned. Not through lectures but through doing. Back near the shoreline, ship work becomes more focused. Every day the tasks gain a little more shape. Someone is always checking the hull for cracks. Someone else adjusts the tar used for waterproofing. Someone smooths a rough edge with a knife. You can almost feel the anticipation settling into the wood itself. Like the ship knows it will touch open water again soon. The shipyard area smells different now. Salt, fresh tar, wet rope, cold seawater. These scents mix into a smell that any Viking would immediately recognize. The smell of a season preparing to move. And while the tools and ships come together, conversations also shift. They're still calm, still soft, but more direct now. The vague ideas of travel begin to turn into possibilities with shape. Someone might ask, should we join the traders heading south next moon? Another might answer with measured thought, if we finish the planting in time, we might. There's no drama, no sudden decisions. Just that slow weighing of responsibilities versus opportunity. Evenings become especially interesting in this period. The fire crackles at the center of the longhouse, but now the atmosphere is more awake. People talk while mending clothes or preparing small equipment. Someone might bring out scraps of leather to patch worn boots. Someone else might test the strength of a rope by pulling it between their hands. You can hear the soft rasp of sharpening stones working across metal edges. Every movement in the longhouse has the same message. Get ready. Not because something enormous is coming, but because the season demands readiness. You might see a woman quietly inventorying stored food, counting dried fish, examining grain sacks, checking the last jars of preserved berries. She notes what can be spared for travel, and what must remain for those staying behind. You might see a man carefully placing a newly finished wooden tool on a shelf, not using it yet, saving it for the moment work truly begins. Even the animals seem to sense the shift. Horses stamp the ground with more energy. Dogs pace the longhouse yard with alert eyes. Chickens wander farther than usual. Everything feels alive again. And as all this activity fills the days, something else begins stirring in the background. Word spreads across the settlement that a distant village sent messages about a gathering. A small early-season market, nothing grand, but enough to attract interest. Chance to trade early goods. Chance to hear fresh news. Chance, maybe, to meet people not seen since last year. It's not a guarantee anyone will go yet, but it becomes part of the evening whisper. That subtle question hanging in the air. Is this the year we travel early? Is this the year we take a slightly longer path? And if the answer is yes, then preparation must begin soon, almost immediately. The longhouse seems to breathe with that unspoken tension. Not fear, not excitement, just awareness. Like standing on the edge of something steady and familiar, yet knowing one step forward will change the rhythm of the season. What will they decide? Who will travel? Who will stay? How far will they go this time? Those answers are still forming, still soft, still waiting for the next moment to unfold. All right, stay with that same soft pace, that same slow breathing rhythm. We're drifting deeper into the Viking year now. The point where late spring begins to lean toward early summer, and everything in their world settles into a kind of calm momentum. Nothing rushed, nothing dramatic, just the natural flow of a life shaped by weather, work, and long, patient routines. Because in this stretch of the season, their days become predictable in the most grounding way. The mornings begin with a cool drift of air rolling through the doorway, fresh, carrying the faint scent of newly opened grass. The longhouse roof creaks softly as the warmer wind presses against it. People rise gradually, not startled, not hurried. There's enough light in the sky now that you can see without a torch, and that alone changes the mood of the entire household. Breakfast is simple again. Porridge made from barley or oats, a drizzle of leftover butterfat, maybe slices of dried fish if there's enough. The meal isn't meant to be enjoyed, just absorbed. Fuel to begin another long day. And once the bowls are scraped clean and set aside, the settlement spreads out into its tasks. Sowing begins in full. This is the moment everyone has been preparing for. The fields have been cleared, fertilized, checked, and checked again. The soil is soft under their boots but not too wet. Men and women walk slowly across it, scattering seeds with practiced movements. Barley, rye, sometimes oats, each handful tossed with a rhythm handed down through generations. Children follow behind, pressing the seeds lightly into the soil with wooden tools or simply their feet, ensuring the crops have the best chance to grow. There's no talking during this work. Only the quiet swish of hands moving, the soft thud of steps, and the distant call of seabirds circling overhead. A whole season's future is being planted into the earth with those calm, repetitive actions. Closer to the settlement, animal work intensifies. Calves and lambs born in early spring are now stronger, more active. People check them carefully, making sure they're healthy enough to graze. Fences are reinforced. Paddocks are cleared. When a few animals wander too far, a child or teenager calls them back with a soft whistle or clapping hands. Horses get brushed more often now. Their coats shed the last bits of winter thickness. Their muscles firm up. They're not just companions or tools. They're symbols of independence, and signs that travel may be near. And all the while, down by the water, the shipyard grows livelier. Longships are inspected one more time. Shields intended for the travel season are brought out from storage, their wooden bodies checked for warping. Oars are polished and lined up. Ropes are measured and tested. You can hear the tapping of hammers, the scrape of a blade smoothing a plank, the deep murmur of men discussing joints, angles, and seaworthiness. But the interesting thing is, Nobody has announced yet whether they'll travel this year. The decision is still hovering in the air, unspoken like an echo waiting for its shape. Evenings drift into a peaceful routine. The longhouse fills with low conversation. Someone sits near the fire repairing a cloak. Someone else oils a wooden tool. A few people recount news from a nearby farm. Births, harvests, weather signs. It's not dramatic. It's just how Viking communities kept their world connected. Small pieces of information passed from person to person until everyone understood the greater picture. And in these evenings, subtle plans begin forming. Someone might mention a rumor of merchants gathering farther south. Someone else recalls that the fishing season might be especially strong this year. Another person wonders if the early summer markets will be large or small. Again, these aren't firm plans, just threads. Thin, delicate threads that may or may not weave into real journeys. All the while, the world around them transforms. Streams thaw completely. The sea loses its winter bite. Birds build nests in the rafters or in the grasses beyond the last boundary line of the settlement. Sunlight lingers later and later into the evening, casting long shadows across the earth. The settlement begins to stand in harmony with its surroundings. Everything alive, everything preparing, everything quietly tuned to the rhythm of the coming season. And as the longhouse settles into its nighttime warmth, you can feel that gentle shift beneath the surface. Not tension, not urgency, just readiness. A readiness that comes from weeks of steady work. From a landscape softening into cooperation. From people listening to the earth. And waiting for the right moment to act. Because soon, very soon, someone will finally speak the words that will decide the shape of the summer. But not tonight. Not yet. All right, lean back a little. Let your shoulders fall. We're moving into the final stretch of this journey together. The end of the Viking year's quiet beginning. The moment where all the routines, all the preparations, all the calm, slow rhythms reach a soft, natural pause. Because now, in this last, we watch them at the edge of early summer, standing inside the longhouse as the day fades into that warm, glowing evening. The sowing is done. The animals are steady. The ships are repaired. Every task that demanded patience has already been answered with patience. And tonight, the longhouse feels full. Not loud, not busy, just full in that contented, lived-in way a home feels when everyone has done their part and can finally let themselves exhale. The fire crackles with a gentle, even sound. Shadows flicker across the carved pillars. People sit in small clusters, some talking quietly, some mending, some simply resting with their hands folded in their laps, eyes half focused on the flames. No one is worried. No one is rushing. They're just existing together. In that steady Viking rhythm that shaped their entire world. Someone pours a bit of drink into a wooden cup. Someone else hums under their breath as they finish sewing a seam. Children curl up near their parents. Dogs stretch out near the doorway, ears twitching at the distant hush of waves. And in this slow, peaceful moment, the decision finally forms. Not through a speech. Not through a grand announcement. Just a soft exchange. One person lifting their eyes and quietly saying, "The weather is turning. The sea looks calm. Maybe it's time." Few nods answer. Few thoughtful breaths. No excitement. No fear. Just acceptance. 'Cause this is how Vikings lived. Not as constant raiders. Not as mythical figures of chaos. But as steady, grounded people who listened to the world. And followed its rhythms with patience and care. So as the fire burns lower, as the last small conversations fade, as people roll out bedding and settle into the warm hush of night, they already know the shape of tomorrow. Some will stay to tend the land. Some will prepare for journeys. Some will wait and watch the season unfold. All of them anchored by the same quiet truth. Life moves slowly. Life moves simply. Life moves in the rhythm of the earth. And now, as this long, soft, ASMR-style Viking journey drifts to its resting point, let your mind settle the way their village settles each night. The fire dimming, the wind softening, The world narrowing into the calm safety of a wooden longhouse after a long day. Take a slow breath in, and let it out gently, like smoke rising from their hearth. Close your eyes for a moment if you want. Feel that quiet Viking night settle around you. The warmth, the stillness, the soft weight of peace drifting over everything. Another breath in, and another breath out, and just like their world, let your thoughts drift into a calm, steady place, knowing the story rests here. But the next step, the next journey, the next discovery, still waits just beyond the horizon, quiet, unrevealed, pulling you toward it in the softest possible way, until you're ready to open that door again.